Previous guest, first question.
Previous guest, first question. It reads, what is the biggest surprise when transitioning out of our service career? Oh man, that's a big one. It for me, really, service career is one first and foremost being a Marine. Serving on active duty. But I think the service part never really leaves. But it's all about the transition and how it kind of conspires to what we do after our term of active duty service. As a full blood Navajo, we have sort of like this coming home ceremony that kind of relieves you of your service as a military personnel, and it's kind of just there because we do take an oath that is forever a part of our lives. And so if you have the mentality that you're always continuous service, especially being in the military, that the orientation of your life really is kind of geared towards combat or some sort of operation that doesn't allow you to really expand and grow in life. So to bring you back home to be a part of that. But for me, transitioning out of our service careers, really about what you hope to learn. A lot of people really don't know what that is. I for sure didn't. I had probably about 16 different jobs within the first 5 years of being in the Marine Corps because one job seems super exciting, whether you use your hand, you're challenged intellectually, you have leadership positions. You have positions where you could absolutely do nothing and just collect a paycheck and be completely content with that. But I think there's always something, the human part of us that constantly continuously wants to learn and grow, and that's what drives us to kind of try to figure out what's next for us. Because in the Marine Corps, you get so many different pieces of that. There's excitement, there's a sense of purpose, there's belonging, there's community, there's pride, there's joy, there's all that stuff, and there's very unique challenges that just almost break you to the point to where you feel like, man, like I can't believe I got through that piece of training, or you survived another deployment, or you got an opportunity to get to a really good school that exercises your ability to become a better leader. So you have all of those different things, and then one day it completely stops. So understanding what that's like for you to transition away from the military, of your respective branch, can be quite the challenge. So definitely a good question. I feel like that's a rabbit hole question, but you could also answer it very specifically depending on what kind of transition you've had. So great question.
Not to sound oversimplified, that purpose, that sense of service, is that what you went into the Marine Corps for, or did it become kind of more about you once you started serving?
Absolutely. So growing up within the Native American community, you're given a lot of responsibility early on, especially being a young man. And like they call it like a men's community, like the man's community. You're taught a lot of different things, like service first. If you see that somebody needs help, you go and help them. Like parents would walk through the door, with a bag full of groceries or something, and we'd always get yelled at for sitting on the couch, kind of looking at them like, "Oh, hey, like you guys are home," and we'd be like, "Hey, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, get up and help us." So there was always this initiative that was kind of like instilled in me very, very young. And so when the military my very first interaction was just sitting in a senior class, looking at a piece of paper and saying, "Hey, what do you want to do?" With once you graduate. And there was college aspects on there. There was military aspects. There was trade schools that you could cross and put a check mark into. And I hadn't really thought about college at that point, so I just put armed services, and it said select a branch, and I was the only one that's predominantly ever known is the Marine Corps. So I was like, you know what, if I ever get any kind of information after high school, I'd like information on that. And I think within a couple of weeks, there was just a general phone call like, "Hey, I'm Sergeant Longoria, Deer Valley, recruiting office. I'd like to, sit down and expand you and see what you meant by, receiving more information about the Marine Corps." And from there, it was just kind of downhill. It was a very quick transition. Took a little bit of time for my family to grasp the concept. I was the only boy in my family, so I have four sisters growing up. My mom partially raised us as a single mom. She met my stepdad while I was in high school. It was great. It was great having him around. But yeah, that's essentially how it kind of started. So the sense of service was really instilled, long before I even knew that it was going to be great for, being in the Marine Corps and having that as a way of life.
Different angles I want to go on. I'm going to take you back before we keep going forward because I'm interested in you growing up. You mentioned the Navajo Nation. So you grew up on the Navajo reservation?
Yeah, it was there between so I was born in Phoenix, and then because reservation life, there's always a home out there. You have grandparents and such. So I transitioned, back and forth between my grandparents' house and my parents' place in Phoenix. So it was kind of like a couple years out on the reservation, a couple of years back in Phoenix, kind of just however the family dynamics were working at the time. So yeah, definitely very, very fond of life on the reservation, just because there's always something to do out there. Life in the city is different, different sort of pace of living. But yeah, always back and forth.
Am I remembering correctly? Is it the Navajo Nation that was the code talkers or has the history of the code talkers?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the Navajo Nation during World War II put together or got a platoon together consisting of 29 Navajo Native Americans and transferred them to Camp Pendleton to essentially work with our level of intelligence within the Marine Corps to develop a code based off of our language.
When you were talking about coming to the end of high school and not really knowing what to do, leading up to that though, is that history something that's really, I'll say, I know the first word that comes to my mind is glorified, but were they really pride themselves on that service in the Marine Corps?
It really wasn't something, and this was primarily due to the secrecy surrounding the code itself, and it only very recently being unclassified and even then, once it was unclassified, the Navajo Nation and those who served as Navajo code talkers really felt like they needed to hold on to that level of secrecy, and so you didn't really hear too many stories about Navajo code talkers, or at least I didn't up until that point in its relevance to me joining the Marine Corps. But you knew that there was something that was very, very proud and privileged that people held on to, especially being a Marine. That definitely like made me feel a lot better about joining the Marine Corps and probably drove kind of that initiative. But yeah, no, there was a great sense of pride serving as a Marine and looking back and learning more about their legacy, learning about their contributions during World War II, and all of them all being proud Marines, and some of them even transitioning into very predominant positions after their time in service and coming home and doing phenomenal things.
I just didn't know if it was part of the normal teachings within the nation to really kind of embrace that and take that on as a significant piece of their history.
Yeah, I think if you come from a military family, which I did not, that nobody in my family up until I met my stepfather, who was in the Navy, no one had ever served. We didn't have any service member that served in combat or served in the Marine Corps. Most of the military service might have had somebody in the Army, but doing maybe some like logistics type jobs. So this was the first. I was actually the first during a time of war to want to join the United States Marine Corps. There's a backstory on getting to the infantry. I definitely wanted to join and serve and be in the infantry. Being a warrior was kind of just something that really encompassed the person who I was at the time, and just doing that in general felt like that was the right decision. So, but I definitely wasn't supported in telling my grandparents and my parents or my siblings, even some of my friends, or them telling, we have kind of a small community with the Native American community, and expressing that I wanted to go into the Marine Corps. There was so much hesitation about, how that might affect, or the outlook that might have, or even their outlook that might have on what lifestyle I was going to have while I was in the service and what that might contribute to afterwards. And I think that was just because there was a big presence of maybe like substance abuse and Native Americans and the veteran community, that they were kind of tied together. There wasn't a great, I guess there wasn't like a great, presence when it came to having those conversations. So it was a lot of hesitation. And then second to that, obviously, there were a lot of deployments going to Iraq. There was a heavy gear towards Afghanistan. And so serving in the infantry, they knew like, hey, this was direct line of action. So it was very hard for them to say, we want to support you in this. But after I graduated boot camp, I got orders to do my first deployment within 6 months of serving in the Marine Corps. So going from high school life, knowing next to nothing, having very basic training of being a Marine, graduating boot camp, and then getting down to School of Infantry, learning the very basics of, infantry riflemen, and then getting assigned to 1st Battalion, 7th Marines out in 29 Palms. And then, they're like, hey, we're going to Iraq. Here's your pamphlet. Here's a map of the area, learn these basic terms. And, some of the senior guys, this is their third time out. So pay attention to what they do. They're going to teach you a lot. So yeah, definitely a unique experience, but they're there's so much, there's a lot that we can definitely dial into.
Are you saying you didn't know everything under the sun when you came out of school of infantry?
Yeah, no, definitely not. Yeah, some speed reloads. Like you could put a chip on your folder, on your shoulder that you completed the 25-mile hike with 60 some plus gear on your back. But that's really it. I do remember sitting at March Air Force Base in the hangar by myself in this little circle because they're like, hey, all you new bald guys sit there in a circle and study, your map, study these little terms. And I remember sitting there like, I have no preparation for this whatsoever. I was just at the School of Infantry, staying at the Dolphin Inn in Oceanside after getting transported by the Sea Breeze shuttle. Like that was our life back then. And a couple weeks after Christmas is when we first deployed.
What year did you go in?
It was in 2005.
Taking it backwards though, just a little bit. As a young kid growing up, what'd you enjoy doing? Like, were you into sports? What was kind of taking up your life?
Early on, I think there was a lot of good contributions to helping my family out. I wouldn't say we grew up poor, but we definitely were, constrained. There were 5 children. My mother didn't have the opportunity to graduate high school. She found, various jobs to support our family. My dad did have a college education. He was working, at a resort as a cultural interpreter at the time, and so we weren't necessarily poor, but we were definitely not like, we didn't have an abundance of things. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment for 14 years, collectively all together until we had the ability to get out to a better place. So early on, I did Native American performances with my dad, kind of like the powwow scene that you would see. So the performance that I did with my dad was the hoop dance, which was traditionally passed down as a healing type dance, which is now which is now transitioned into like a performance of arts and stuff like that. It's definitely a lot of the traditions and stories still carried down. And then I also did the men's fancy war dance. And so as my dad, brought me into, singing Native American songs and being a part of the powwow community, we were able to do like certain shows early on. So, and I got paid for these shows. And so that kind of contributed to me helping out our household. And so early on, it was either doing a lot of that, doing a lot of travel. I remember going to different states and doing shows and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun, great exposure. But, there's kind of less time to really like just be a kid in general.
Got it.
A lot of responsibility for like the only son, but I was second oldest in my family. And it was just, I look back on it now and that's kind of where I get like this drive to like, hey, like, what are we doing for work today? What are we doing to support the family and stuff like that? But yeah, growing up, I really didn't have too many complaints. I believe my dad was very stern with me on a lot of different things. Having both parents around was definitely a privilege. And, my mom was loving and caring, and I feel like they absolutely did their best. So
when you filled out that interest card coming to the end of high school, did you put down military service secretively, so to speak? Like, your parents, did they know at that time that you were even thinking about it?
Definitely not. Definitely not. And I think they would have imagined that I would have put down college or maybe a trade school. Definitely not military. And so the story is that I actually got my mom. I went home and I said, hey, recruiter called me. I want to go see the recruiter. And she was like, absolutely not. I think there's very few times I've heard my mom cuss. Actually, probably the first time I heard her cuss. She was like, probably the F not. And I was like, oh, man. All right. Well, we'll table that a little bit. I'll come back. Longoria picks up the phone again and he's like, hey, Chili, I know you've probably been busy. Like we talked a couple months ago. Like, what do you think about, getting your parents in here to see if we can further the conversation? I finally convinced my mom to go down to the office and we had this perfect example. There was a sergeant who was just an admin Marine, nothing against that. He had a couple of ribbons, looked great. And he was like, Mom, take a look at this Marine right here. He's been in the Marine Corps for 5 years. He's not seen combat. His role, his position has kept him here because that's what the Marine Corps needs. Great selling point. Did a phenomenal job. My mom signs the paper.
Marketing 101.
Marketing 101, absolutely. And the job that I chose in front of her was to be an armorer. The guys who go in and take care of the weapon systems for the Marine Corps. She was like, okay, great. He's going to be in an enclosed building. He's, touching the weapons. That's about it. And
now, are you looking at the delayed entry?
I was 17 years old. We were in the delayed entry program, and I'm winking at Sergeant Longoria, and I was like, this is not what I'm here for. So, he leaves it blank on the paper, and after my mom signs everything, we mark the infantry for it, and we go from there. My mom doesn't know anything. I go to the MEPS, we do the whole thing. I go to the airport, arrive here in San Diego, graduate.
Hey, real quick, let's talk surfing and bourbon. The Pendleton Surf Club's all-military surf contest is happening October 9th through the 12th. at Church Surf Break on Camp Pendleton. Whether you ride a longboard or a shortboard, if you're active duty, a veteran, or a military spouse, this is your chance to paddle out, compete, and connect. It's 4 days of nonstop action, pro-level judging, raffles, giveaways, and shared stoke with your crew on the sand. Your registration includes meals, contest swag, and the chance to take home the trophy. Spots are limited, and registration closes October 1st, so secure your place now at PendletonSurfClub.com. And for those whose ears perked up when I said bourbon, Pendleton Surf Club has released Board Shack Bourbon, crafted to celebrate the stories, the service, and the surf. Every penny from every bottle sold funds the event and supports the surfers. So even if you don't surf, you can support the event and enjoy some good bourbon. Grab your board, get your bottle, and help give back to military members and veterans. Go check out PendletonSurfClub.com.
I go to School of Infantry as normal, and then I go to 1-7, and I have to call her because they were like, hey, those of you, the SOI instructors are like, hey, those of you who are going to 1-7, just so you guys know, you guys ship out in 6 weeks. And I was like, oh man, like I just felt like this cold shiver on my
that
body.
Story to Mom.
Yeah, I got this. I even get goosebumps right now talking about it because I was terrified. So I called my sister. I was like, let me see if we can soften this blow a little bit.
Give me some advice.
Yeah, and she was like, I can't believe you called me first. You better hang up and call Mom. So I called her and I was like, Mom, unfortunately in 6 weeks, I'm going to go to Iraq. And the second time I heard my mom, because she's like, I fucking knew it. I don't know if we can cuss on here, but she was like, I effing knew it. And that was it. And I was like, and since then, I think she knew
she
that.
She shows up at the front gate.
Yeah.
Where's my son? He's going home.
That's right. My mom took it, I would say, with an open heart. She took it with love and as much protection as she could give me. And she was like, hey, this is gonna happen. And so when I say that I didn't have, as much support, I almost had like no support getting to the Marine Corps up until a point to where I was like, okay, like now we're going to actually face, this thing. I'm, privileged to be a Marine for one, and my family's going to endure, this kind of stay home thing while they have to worry about someone being out on the front lines. And my mom, she enveloped every bit of it. She wanted to know who the Marines I was going out with. She wanted to know who my leadership was. I remember her asking my first team leader, like, hey, like he's brand new, like do whatever you can to bring him home. And I remember that interaction because I had that same interaction years later with Marines that I took to Afghanistan, and their parents coming to me saying, hey, make sure you bring my son home. And so coming like full circle, like I understand like where my mom sits now, and she hates when I tell that story because she's like, the fact that you did that, when we were going through that time, she was like, you were so sneaky about it. And I was like, I just, I kind of knew what I wanted. But looking back, we wouldn't change anything. We've learned and grown so much together.
So between the time you signed up and the time you went to boot camp was how long?
I want to say 6 months. Yeah, about 6 months. I had 3 months of high school left. I got to enjoy like a 2-week vacation, and then the next rotation of guys that were shipping out to MCRD, I was part of that first rotation out of high school.
Did you find yourself kind of going down the rabbit hole of learning everything you could prior to going into boot camp, or did you kind of go in cold and just go, hey, I'll learn it as it comes?
Well, the good thing about the delayed entry program is they flood you with tons of knowledge. They want you to know the hymn, some basic history stuff, how to pass your PFT, what maybe the drill instructors might be like, that this is more of like a mental plus physical strategy, what teamwork looks like, how to run and cadence and do all these different like basic things. So when you get there, it's not so hard to kind of get you, I guess, like conformed, or you don't have the sort of initial shock. You can definitely see the guys who are just, hey, I signed my papers 2 days ago. Here I am. They were just completely blown away, sitting on the stairwell, like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And you're like, you don't got a choice. We're all coming. So, yeah, it's definitely a unique experience. But delayed entry program was probably what got me really prepped for that, because it was a hard push. They were like, hey, you're going in 3 months. You're like 15 pounds overweight. You got like, you're in high school. Like, we want to make sure you succeed. And, the recruiters are there for a purpose to filling the ranks of the Marine Corps. But there are a few that are out there. I would say a vast majority that are very great at this, but they truly care about the success of who they're sending into the Marine Corps, because they know one, it's going to be life-changing, but two, it's going to be a foundation for, the rest of their lives. So if you can give them the correct start, and you give them the tender, kind of like the tender love and care from a recruiter standpoint, I had that phenomenally. I had a guy that was on a recruiter's assistance, and I swear he like hated us. There was two poolees, And he was constantly like, hey, you two are the guys that are coming with me to the gym. You guys come here with me everywhere. We spent a lot of time with him. And so I just had a good opportunity to start in the right direction.
That being said, what was day one like at MCRD for you?
Day one was, for one, if we had just started summer. It was the first time being in San Diego. It was humid for me.
I was gonna say, you're coming for Phoenix. It's not like it was hot.
Dry heat. Like it was a little bit of humid for me. I just remember sweating profusely, not sleeping for the first, what is it, like 72 hours. You go through the line. It's just, I mean, it's culture shock. Like, hey, here's a list of rules. Here's what happens, when you don't obey them. These are this is receiving. In 2 days, you guys are going to get picked up by your drill instructor. Here's how watch works. We're on military time now. Those of you who, say midnight, it's incorrect. So it's just so much of like getting you acclimated. Black Friday was definitely the worst day ever, though. That's for sure. It was nonstop. I just remember everything that you would do, no matter what, it was wrong. And it's there. That's just to make sure, like, hey, here's the baseline of where you need to be before we go forward. But receiving was kind of like nice, you got walked to the chow hall, you were dressed in, the funny
before the storm,
the funny style of wearing your camis, you're kind of just chilling there for the first couple of days, just getting through the works. And then that Black Friday comes and it's definitely, I honestly almost don't remember it because it was so long. What I felt like was even longer of the first couple of days, but then it just continues. Like it just didn't stop. Sundays come and you're just like, man, you get those couple hours to rest and then you go right back to it. So it's definitely a long 13 weeks. You don't perceive it to be that long. When you look at it on paper, you're like 13 weeks, that's not too bad. But every grueling minute that you have there is definitely elongated for sure.
There's no way to say that it was fun or anything like that. There are some people who I've talked to, even if they wanted to go in, once they got there, like, holy shit, this isn't what I expected. Some other people went, man, I went in knowing it was going to be hard and I just rolled with it. How did you handle boot camp?
I think more from the physical side because I wasn't like, I didn't do any sports. I didn't really weight train. I wasn't necessarily lazy, but I didn't look at like physical fitness as kind of like this is where we need to be before we go to boot camp. So I was probably more sore than in most days than not. I think I got the bare minimum of like, you got to do 3 pull-ups in order to get to boot camp, or at least, not get slayed like your first second that you're there. So it was definitely a learning curve for that. But mentally, I felt like my lifestyle from being Native American, understanding like the harshness of being on the Navajo reservation, living in a community that, was very high in crime, where you had to be kind of like street smart, so to speak. It like the mentality side to it wasn't that hard. It was just like not really understanding how many different expectations you were going to have on all different levels. And so I think that was probably the most unique challenge for me, is to kind of grasp those concepts. But physically, I felt like you told me to run, 100 miles in a direction just because like it just happened. So I didn't really kind of fight too much on that. But yeah, the only shock I felt like was just trying to figure out, okay, like what's the expectation and how do I meet it? And when you're in boot camp with the drill instructors, that level of expectation is like infinitely, into forever. So that's probably only the challenging part.
But you said previously that your dad was really strict on you. So I'm assuming a little bit brought you into the Marine Corps dialed in kind of personally.
Yeah.
As far as understanding, hey, there's a pecking order, there's rules, follow the rules, and you'll get along well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was probably a lot more conformed, easy to train, so to speak, coming in than guys that might have had, maybe like one parent growing up, or maybe like a lifestyle that, allowed them to kind of just have more relaxed environment. Whereas growing up for me was like, hey, here's how you provide for your family. Like, hey, dinner. I think at like 13 years old was the first time they were like, hey, we need you to cook dinner because mom and dad got to work late. And I look at my sisters, I'm like, do you guys know what we're doing? They're like, we don't know what to do. Like, how do you turn the oven on? Like, what am I doing? And so from there, it's kind of just like forced learning to take care of my family, take care of my siblings growing up. And it was just like, that's just the way it was.
Did your family get to come to graduation?
Absolutely.
What'd they think of you at the end of that 13 weeks?
They all cried because they were like, you look like skin and bones. Like this was a concentration camp for you. They definitely said that I had this I don't know, personification, like somehow, some way, like I was better than where I was, or I was better than where I came from. And all the good sense, like, they saw the discipline. They saw this sort of like meanness that Marines develop, while you're going through that training. and they felt like there was more seriousness that I had very young. I mean, you take a 17-year-old kid who's, has no interest in, what's happening within the world around him, and you thrust him into an environment where it forces him to learn some things very, very quickly. It's definitely noticeable. So I wasn't walking around marching everywhere like you see sometimes in these funny videos, but I definitely took things a lot more seriously once I was at that level. And then, getting 10 days of leave was great. I went home. I enjoyed, the good life being there for a bit. But it's like the switch, you turn it back on. We're putting back on the uniform. We get to SOI, you check in and they're like, hey, these are your new instructors that get you through the second half of what it means to be a Marine, either MTT or SOI.
I'm willing to bet if there was a way to go back in time and record you just walking down the street before going into boot camp, and then after you came out, you may not think that you were marching, but I'll bet you there was a formation to the way you were walking.
There probably was. There probably was. I tried not to be so, motivated, as they would say, but it was hard to do that. You love putting on that Marine Corps, jacket and shirt wherever you went. You rocked the high and tight for as long as you could until, maybe you got, married or had kids, but it was definitely a thing. It was definitely a thing.
For nobody who's experienced 29 stumps, we'll just kind of say that it's not Phoenix-like in the heat.
Yeah.
But where I want to go with, so now how soon did you deploy?
I had 6 weeks out of being at SOI, and then it's SOI is a different pace. As soon as you graduate, either the next day or the same day, you're transported out to your units, and they kind of receive you. So we did the same day transfer. I honestly remember passing one single Walmart, one Home Depot, and nothing else. And it's the middle of the night. We just happened to be there during this like huge windstorm, so there's dust everywhere. You can't see nothing. And no one's there to receive us. Like we get there and they're like, hey, the duty's there. He's like, somebody said you guys were coming. He's like, I got a couple of rooms for you guys. The rest of you guys, hang out in the hallway. And in the morning, we'll get you sorted out. I think they were like out in some like big training thing, and we were just getting received. But it was about 6 weeks after graduating the School of Infantry. I ended up in 29 Palms with 1-7 Suicide Charlie.
And how soon after that are you? Because your first deployment was to Iraq, correct?
Mm-hmm.
When from graduation of boot camp to feet on the ground in Iraq, how long?
6 months.
And once you're into that, and I'm not trying to glamorize combat or anything like that, where I want to get is the mindset. Are you even 18 by the time?
I just turned 18.
So as an 18-year-old with basically no life experience in combat for the first time, what was that impact like?
First and foremost was, how do you not die? Like, how do you not make a stupid decision that either gets you killed or gets somebody else, in a bad position? And I think a lot of the senior leadership that I had, because the couple of weeks that they had with us, like the mentality, the things that they were prepping us for, they really took that very seriously, because they didn't want a bunch of new guys coming in and either them, getting hurt or them, getting killed. They wanted to make sure that they had the best, support that they could too. And the only thing I kept thinking was like, first, hell yes, I get to do my job. Because I know that there were a lot of guys that we talked to, like, yeah, we had to go through a lot of different trainings and, do, all these different things before we even got to do a deployment. And I was at 6 months, touching base right there in AQ, just, okay, we're going to be here for a couple of days. We got a few briefs to give you guys. And then you guys are going right down to a place that's close to the Syrian border. And that's going to be your place of home for the next 7 months. So it's really just like, I don't know what it is. Like, there's this like level of like, once that switch is on, you're so focused on what's going on around you. And there's a lot of movement, there's commands that come down, places you guys need to get to. There's, general, I guess, situational awareness, but then you're just waiting for like, okay, when are we actually going to get to where we need to go? And the first patrol we did was in the middle of the night, just because that's probably when it was the safest. But, yeah, after that, it was just really, I learned so much. Every day was a learning. Everything was brand new, and all those really experiences kind of like shaped the rest of how my combat deployments went after that. But yeah, it was, for one, I was scared because I was like, man, here's where it could happen. Second to that, I was looking at all the other guys that we went there with, and I was thinking like, I hope I don't let them down in any way, shape, or form. And whatever happens, like, we're here to do exactly what we're trained to do. So there's tons of different feelings about that. But for sure I wasn't thinking about, okay, when are we going home? Like it was, how do I get through day one? And then that lasted for, 250 something plus days.
So coming home from that first deployment, what was life like for you? How were you looking at yourself differently? If that looking at that kid in the mirror coming back after that first deployment, what was different in you?
A lot of different things. I think very quickly, especially with that deployment, you learned how to compartmentalize a lot of different things. I remember the first rocket attack we got through, just trying to calm down and focus my attention on what was happening after that was very difficult for me. So there was just like a lot of compartmentalizing, a lot of the IED attacks that happened out there, a lot of the small firefights that happened out there, the raids, the demand, to do continuous patrols to protect your base at all times, to give constant reports. Because my assignment was to be a radio operator. So it was great. I got to do what Navajo Marines in the past in World War II were doing, just without the secrecy of the code. And also another fellow Marine who was in a different platoon who was also Navajo. So we'd often play with each other on the radio on different patrols and stuff like that.
Volunteer or voluntold to do radioman?
Voluntold. Yeah. Well, kind of a funny gesture to like, hey, where's that Navajo kid at? It was like, hey, you're my radio guy. And I was like, what? And I was like, man, I got to carry that thing around. And, back in 2006 was when the deployment took place. And those giant, Prick 19 radios with the double batteries on the end and all sorts of heavy stuff. Those things were heavy. So I was definitely not happy about them. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you should be proud to carry the radio. Like, don't you have like the Navajo wind talkers or something? I remember all this conversation. I thinking like, this is not what I wanted to do. So, but I took it full in stride. I got to know my commanders on a different level because, the officers spent a lot of time with the radio guys. Hearing, them plan things. It was just a different environment. So I was happy that happened. And also there were certain things that I didn't have to do as a radio man. They were like, hey, like the radio guys, go start, taking care of the gear. You guys don't have watch, right now, or, there was just it was so there were some pros and cons with it, but yeah, the weight aspect definitely wasn't there, but being situationally aware from a command standpoint, from being a radio operator was a better opportunity than, just being positioned on the street waiting to be given orders. So there was probably that aspect that I haven't really thought about until now.
That at the end of that first deployment, how much downtime did you have before you deployed again?
I believe it was 6 months. 6 months again. I left before Christmas that time of second deployment. We spent Christmas there in country in Iraq. It was kind of like, well, in 29 Palms, you constantly saw, battalions deploying. It was like the Mecca. If you got stationed at 29 Palms, you were going to see combat. During that time, you were going to see combat, continuously, whether that was tanks, whether that was artillery, whether that was LAR units, infantry units. We had comm school guys there. If you were in 29 Palms, you were going to see combat. So, the second deployment it was kind of just like that was a gimme. I think they had announced it right as about the time we got home. They said, hey, we got a couple of movements to do, while we're here stateside. Make sure you guys are taking care of yourselves, see your family, husbands, go see your wives, guys who are fathers, take care of your kids. And in 6 months, we're probably going to do this rotation again. So in the back of our mind, we kind of already knew that our downtime would probably be there, but we were already thinking like, okay, what's going to happen next deployment?
For you, you're coming to the end of your first enlistment right around that point in time?
No, actually, they squeezed one more deployment out of us. So 3 deployments within those first 4 years. So honestly, and when I look at the dates now, my service record, I'm like, I don't even know how I did that. How you go through 6 months of just fresh to, basic infantry rifleman to first combat deployment to the second one and then on to the third. And by the end of the third, it was definitely less kinetic. We didn't do anything dismounted. We were giving, somewhere between like 20 and 30 MRAPs to operate from with, a couple of Humvees here and there. So we became more long distance patrols than we were. We were transitioning with our police mentor teams and our efforts to kind of turn the country over. So definitely, I would say a better deployment because we had less to worry about as far as like being kinetically operational. And it was more of like, hey, here's our presence. We had very few contacts during that deployment. We didn't lose any Marines during that deployment. We had, guys get injured from being shot or, being injured from an IED or, RKG-3s were a common thing for our patrols that were commonly going through marketplaces and stuff like that, just because, attacks like that were easy to do against us. But outside of that, We had a trailer to stay in with bunk beds and a little locker to keep your stuff in. There were showers. There was mid rats at the end of the night. So we had, I would say, like that third deployment was more like the good life. We stood watch around the base that we were on, which was not Fallujah itself, the base that was outside of that. And the Ugandans would stand watch with us. So those guys were hilarious. So it was a different deployment. Actually, I take that back. We did lose one Marine, Staff Sergeant, who was out doing a security check for an IED that was located. Unfortunately, I think the IED that he picked up, were trying to get it out. Once they thought that they had disarmed it, was armed with a mercury switch at the bottom of that. So as soon as they kind of tilted the 155 shell up, it unfortunately detonated. And he was the single Marine that we had lost during that deployment.
I don't want to jump too far ahead too quickly. I want to know if when you first went in, were you thinking career or were you thinking one enlistment and I'll reevaluate?
I was thinking one career and just
One enlistment or
one. I'm sorry, yeah, one enlistment. And it was just a unique conversation. We got sat down with the guys that had multiple deployments. We had a lot of different experiences during our time, and they were like, "Hey, there's this huge initiative for us to go to Afghanistan, for us to really ramp up operations there. The guys that have a lot of combat experience, there's an incentive to keep you in the Marine Corps. I think it was like 60 grand or something like that." And they're like, if you do it here, it's tax free, so on, all the good information that comes with that. So I have, unfortunately, I called my wife and I was like, hey, there's this opportunity. I kind of want to talk to you about it before we say yes. And she was like, well, the money piece is okay. Like that'll always be okay for anybody. She was like, but I want to know if this is something you want to do. She was like, I could tell you yes, because, the money might help stabilize us in a way that, we couldn't do in for, a couple of years from now. And I was like, I love my job. I love what I do. I love the Marines that I serve with. We kind of collectively got together and said, hey, if who's going next? And that happened to be 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, from the monitor standpoint. And we're like, well, if we do this together, there'd be a good chance we can stay together and we can go to 3-5 and stay together. And that's exactly what happened. At the time my wife said, yeah, she was like, I think we can do this. She was like, as long as, you're home for a while. And I was like, well, they got to do a MEU first. And then after that, they're slated to go Afghanistan. That's kind of the role play that they had there. As soon as I got home, unfortunately, I had my leave. My wife was pregnant at the time. We had our son during that time. So it was great. He was born on September 11th. He was born 9/11 in Gallup, New Mexico, on the Navajo reservation. And I think I had like 30 days plus an extended 10 days. And then I got a call from a good friend of mine. He was like, hey, like I've already checked into 3-5. First sergeant here says, he needs you to check in a little early because we're getting ready to do this training operation in Bridgeport. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm on leave. He's like, nah. He's like, he said that if you don't check in now, they're just going to send you right out. He's like, I want to make sure you have time to get your house situated and your family moved, all that good stuff. So I was like, all right. So I, very quickly, like we do in the Marine Corps, things happen really fast. You pivot and you shift and you make things happen. I packed my family up out of Arizona. We drove a U-Haul down to Pendleton, checked into base housing, said, hey, I have orders. I'm checking in. Can we get housing secured? I think within a week, I think we only stayed in a hotel for about a week, got our house situated, got to 3-5, checked in. Huge parade deck, expecting, us to go on a MEU first. And he said, hey, gents, orders changed. We got to go to Afghanistan and we're leaving in 6 months. And I just, the second time I felt myself being like, man, like, I don't know if we chose the right idea because I kind of knew this was going to happen. But, we're, at the same time, there's like, yes, like, we're done with Iraq. Everybody's been talking about Afghanistan. They've been talking about the Taliban there and the tactics and the combat operations. And as a Marine, as a leader, being in the infantry, you want to do it again. There's something about it that just like, okay, we got a new fight, let's go there. And a lot of Marines that I was with, maybe one or two be like, no, like, I think I've had enough. But the majority of the guys that are with, like, if you guys could go to Afghanistan, would you? And all of us were like, yeah, like, absolutely. Like, if that's where the fight is and that's where they need Marines, that's where we want to go. So that's kind of how that piece kind of unfolded.
Was it that deployment when you ended up getting injured?
Yeah, it was that deployment. So I had time to go to Bridgeport, which was crazy training. It was cold. It was phenomenal. It was insane, operating at, 10, 11,000 feet up in the air, new environment, new fighting strategy was great training.
Is that specifically to prepare for Afghanistan and the altitude?
Yeah, that was specifically to prepare for Afghanistan. And then we come back, we go to South Korea for just a little over a month and a half, which was, they told us we were there for some training exercise. There was only two companies there at a single time. So I think we were just there in rotation for some sort of security type, presence. We come home. I get a couple more weeks with my family. We then have to do the normal 29 Palms run where they get you ready to go back to combat and you spend a month out there. And then I come back and I have, I think, 3 months with my family before we do another deployment. And that was the initial deployment. So I was only I was by then now I'm fully integrated with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. I'm assigned to Kilo Company. The battalion.
Did your job change or you still a radio man?
Yeah, no, just I went back to being a part of a police mentor team. So I was taking out of in 1-7, I was just an infantry rifleman. I was just made the radio guy to take care of the radio the entire time. So we had radio guys that were assigned in their MOS, and then we had the guys that helped them out. Hey, you're carrying the radio kind of thing. And then I'm at 3-5 and we're getting ready to go to Sangin. And then we get into Sangin and we only spend maybe like 2 weeks there. I'm part of a police mentorship team. So right before I leave, the guys that I got used to the entire time I'm with 3-5, because I had a lot of experience with working with the Iraqi police and training them and learning their language and understanding, how to get them to operate individually. They're like, hey, there's only 2 of you that are like this, and we need to pull you guys to go to headquarters battalion because they're putting a police mentor team together too as well there. So the PAT team that we got assigned with, and this is really crazy because Moreno, Yahir Moreno was lived in Oceanside here. We went to boot camp together, graduated together, went to SY together, graduated together, went to 1-7, did all 3 deployments at one time. I was his team leader. And then the 3rd deployment, he had his own team. We left 3-5 together, went to 3-5 together. He was actually the guy who called me and said, hey, First Sergeant said he wants to check you in early. So he was like my best friend. He was looking out for me and stuff. And then we go to Afghanistan together. We get to assign to the same police mentorship team together, and we go to 3-5 and we get deployed together. He was with a different, actually I think he stayed in the rear because we were doing like a left seat, right seat kind of thing the morning that I got hurt, which was October 9th in 2010. So we didn't get to stay in Sangin. There was a PAT team that was assigned to 311, which was an artillery battery unit, and a FOB called Zumbrigi in Kajaki, Afghanistan, which was like the dam area about 50 miles north of where Sangin was. And they're like, we need to send you guys there because that PAT team needs to come home. And we check in with them, and I'm only there for like 2 weeks as well. So I'm only in country for about a month, very fresh. We start, doing these small patrols to get the lay of the land, and everything's completely new. I spent the last, 6 months working up to studying what Sangin was about, the British Royal Marines that had presence there beforehand, to only leave that place and go to a different area of operations, completely brand new to me. So the patrol that we were doing was essentially just to movement to contact, go out as far as you can go so that you guys understand, where these limitations are for you and what the capabilities are. We get to that last point where they say, hey, this is exactly where you're either going to encounter a lot of IEDs or you're going to see, the Taliban guys come down on their little motorbikes and engage you guys. And yeah, sure as as they told it, we got to a place out towards the edge of a farm field, kind of, just shy of a wide open area with some, housing in the background and a small mountain range on the back, and maybe only 15 minutes there. And those first rounds of AK-47 fire start coming in, and we do what we do as Marines. The first section starts laying down that covering fire while we try to maneuver into a better position. And we're only in this firefight for maybe like 10, 15 minutes. And we're running around, and I look over a small berm past an area that we had cleared, and I was like, that's a way better position for us to be in than out here on this side. And so I go over, I kind of check it really quick, and I come back, and the section leader at the time comes running over, and he's like, hey, man, you can't do that out here. You're not allowed to maneuver in different positions like that. We need to clear things as we go. He's like, I understand we're getting shot at right now. He's like, but we're in a concealed position now. So he's like, well, I don't need to move. And at that point I was like, oh man, like that's a life lesson right there. I probably should remember that forever. And as soon as he turned around to walk back to the other machine gun that was behind us, I turned around and walked back to the second machine gun that we had with us, the 240 guys, and the IED goes off. And it took me like 2 seconds to realize like I'm in a lot of trouble because, the radial nerve in my arm was completely shot. So it kind of naturally curled up, that I didn't have any function of it. My level of consciousness was kind of shaken. I could see both my legs are completely, torn apart. and the only thing that I see running coming is the corpsman, and they're trying to tell him like, "Hey, doc, like just wait." But he had already been there. He was the corpsman that was with the 311 battery for the last 7 months, and he had already dealt with countless Marines that had already been injured by IEDs as well. And so he comes running over to me and he works on me, very, very quickly. I think I was only on the ground for like 40 minutes tops before I had medevac helicopter come in and pick me up and kind of take me out of the area. But yeah, October 9th in 2010 was my last combat, operation day for as far as being a Marine.
From that conversation with the team leader to stepping on the IED, distance-wise, how much ground did you cover before you encountered it?
Well, because we were under, getting shot at, I think he sort of, as soon as he turned, he ran. He just wanted to make sure I knew, like, hey, don't, run around this area because it's heavily saturated with IEDs.
I'm just trying to get a mental perspective of how close it actually was to you, because it sounds like literally almost maybe a flip of a coin of who might have stepped on it based on what you guys were doing.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure it was me that stepped on it because I immediately felt all that pressure on my left foot. I knew that he was off in a distance. I could still hear him because he obviously hit the ground. He wasn't hit by any shrapnel, but I just remember him saying, what the hell was that? I thought maybe he was thinking we got mortared, or maybe, because we were using artillery earlier that day too. And he was just trying to figure out what happened because we essentially had cleared this area that we were in because we knew we were going to kind of sit there for just a bit. And what had happened was after they did the post-blast analysis, they found out the Taliban had changed, their TTPs and the way that they were laying IEDs at the time. So they were using wood pressure plates with carbon fiber rods to kind of defeat the metallic signature of the IED itself. And then they were offsetting the actual charge, and they put things in plastic jugs. And then their power source was also offset, and they were using some really thin copper wires that unfortunately just don't give enough, signal detection back to the Valence systems that we're using. So that kind of changed or was added to a strategy as Marines kind of went forward into operating after I had left the country. But yeah, I don't know if I really thought about that as far as like who might have set that off, but I know he was a distance away when I looked behind me, and he was just like, what the hell just happened? We were in a cleared area. I just got done talking to you about getting blown up. So I think there's a little bit of irony there.
And I wasn't trying to imply of who actually stepped on it. What I was getting at is you commented that you had two machine gunners behind you guys.
Yeah.
He was moving to one, you were moving to the other one,
right.
Correctly? And I'm just trying to get an idea if somebody's trying to get a mental picture from you guys having that conversation to that second machine gunner that you were moving to. How much distance are we talking about?
I was probably maybe like 10 steps away from them.
So what I'm getting at is anybody in that immediate area, literally it was, no pun intended, short straw, who could have potentially.
That's right.
So it was, now you were talking about how that was a normal perimeter, I'll call it a perimeter point where you would engage or get contact.
Correct.
You're either going to start receiving incoming fire or you're going to engage an IED at this perimeter point.
That's correct.
How often, so I guess where I'm going at is was it not area that you guys, once you claimed, could just stay there and ensure that no new IEDs were set? Or were you re-clearing every time you were out on patrol?
There were re-clearing efforts, probably about 90% of every patrol we went out on. And that was just because the amount of Marines that we had, there wasn't enough to strategically place, and keep things continuously clear. You'd clear, the market one time, and 3 months later, it's a stash point again.
Got it.
You clear tree lines, they come IED points again. You clear, you try to clear these compounds that have holes in them. They become, new sniper positions, a couple months or even weeks later, because they also know that we have the tendency to think once something's cleared, it's now safe. Well, let's use that against the Marines in the very next, within a couple hours, let's make sure that they understand it's not that way. So the difference, I think, in fighting in both places is one is, urbanized versus rural. In rural areas, we've got, tons of space to maneuver around in. So you feel like there's an abundance of, I guess, like time or mitigation between you and the next threat. Whereas in, the urban environments, you're fighting street to street, you're looking at every single piece of trash and everything's a threat to you out there. So there's definitely different mentalities in fighting, definitely different styles in fighting. When in Iraq, you can turn a corner and you're completely safe space. In Afghanistan, it's, a 500-meter run to the next little berm that might give you some better cover and protection. So it was definitely different. So I remember the very first patrol we went on, You saw these little white markers everywhere, just spray paints, and you're like, what is all this white stuff? He's like, those are IEDs that we couldn't clear because there's too many. Engineers won't come out here for some toe popper that exists, so we can only mark them and move on. And I was like, that is insane. And these were in every direction that you can think of. And they were kind of everywhere. So they did their best to make lanes that were continuously watched to make it safe for resupplies. Our main fob in Zumbrigi was supported by two kind of like very strategic mountaintops that they placed some OPs on that were continuously and only very manually supported. So any resupplies that they got, was like a 2-day kind of effort. Like, hey, let's spend one day bringing water, second day bringing batteries, and maybe some new ammunition and stuff like that. So it was a way to kind of keep some level of presence of an observation, but still so dangerous, so dangerous just being in that environment.
From the time the incident happened, walk me through the process of getting to medical care. So from the initial explosion, corpsman comes over and treats you. What's the first step? And then how soon are you actually in a hospital?
I actually don't know. Because as soon as Doc, put both tourniquets on both my legs, he secured both of my arms, gave me a little bit of morphine. I kind of calmed down a little bit, and they start working on getting that 9 line worked up. Like I said, 40 minutes, it seems like, not that much of a long time. And for me, it seemed a lot shorter than that. And I was like, man, that seemed like 15 minutes. He's like, no. He's the guys I got a chance to talk to after we came home. He's like, we were there for like good 40 minutes. And then we only spent maybe an hour and a half there, finishing, defending our position before we pulled out. So it was kind of a short.
Now, was it 40 minutes just to get you stabilized for transport?
40 minutes to get me stabilized for transport. Not long after that, the bird lands. And as soon as I get on board, I think the PJs kind of assess like, hey, you're probably going to go into shock sometime soon. We want to make sure that we kind of mitigate that as much as possible, and I get put to sleep. So on the bird, I'm immediately put into an induced in coma. And then I go from the report, I go to Bastion to get some, sustained life-saving injury surgeries there because they have those capabilities. And then I go to Voluntold, Germany for about a week. And then I'm transported back home to the United States to Baltimore, Maryland, to the Walter Reed Naval Medical Center there. And then I wake up in that hospital, and it's been about 2 weeks.
So that's the first time you could really say that you were truly conscious enough to understand where you were and what kind of, because I'm assuming there had to be periods where you were kind of coming out of it a little bit, but never really to the point where you were conscious and aware of what was going on?
No, actually, for me, and this is something that I shared with my dad when we were going through treatment, he was like, he asked the very same question. He's like, did you know 2 weeks had passed by? And I was like, honestly, I was sitting in the middle of the desert watching the sky go by extremely fast, and I'm just on the side of a berm waiting. And I felt like it was like this understanding of like I was right in the balance of either dying and me trying to stay alive. And I told him, I was like, the only thing I could hear is your voice trying to say like, hey, just hang on, like, come back to us and stuff like that. That was really my own like recognition of like, that was like my in-between moment. I only know then consciously that I woke up in the hospital because the TV's playing and I can kind of see all the medical equipment, and I just feel extremely uncomfortable because there's a lot of pain still. And from then on, it was just, continuous doctor visits, and I got used to the idea like, I think I'm going to be okay. Like, I'm not going to die or nothing bad's going to happen after this. But there was just that level of like, am I truly alive? Like, did I make it back? But very quickly, I felt like I got acclimated to the hospital. And then there were other guys that would come in and say, hey, do you know Lance Corporal so-and-so or PFC or, Sergeant so-and-so? And these were the guys that were getting injured after me and also in transit to the hospital. Or, most unfortunately, these are the guys that were passing away while my time was at the very first being into the hospital. So I was one of, I think we had 3 casualties before I got injured. So I was the 4th one to come into the hospital facility, kind of like very severe sustained injuries. And then it was just constant after that, week after week. There was 3 or 4 Marines that were coming from 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, either out of Sangin Valley or out of Kajaki, the Kajaki area. And that was really hard to see because I had kind of been through the initial first month of going through that recovery process. That I was seeing guys come in and there was such an agony, such shock, such family shock, trying to figure things out. And so, I would constantly try to talk to the new guys coming in saying, hey, in a month from now, it's going to kind of get a little bit better right now. And we were talking about injuries and, how, what we were doing when we got injured. And, and then people were asking if, other Marines were okay, because there were multiple injuries for certain attacks that were happening there. And so, um, I think just the environment made it feel like you were going to be okay. And that was probably the best feeling about being there under those circumstances.
When you first came out of it and you were aware and you're at Walter Reed, how soon do you know, or what was the experience like of realizing you were now an amputee?
I think being on the ground when I heard the corpsman say, "Hey, he's gonna," we have a double amputee, just because of how severe both my legs were. I had this initial thought that I had already lost both my legs. So knowing that I was able to keep one and one was salvaged, it was disheartening for sure. I mean, how catastrophic it is to lose, primary function of your body and be very conscious of that. I definitely felt very down. I continually asked myself, how am I going to, you know, be there for my guys? How am I going to be a father to my son? How am I going to be as a man as I go forward? Somebody who can't do all these things that I was doing before. This initiative and pride of being of service and just going out and doing these day to day activities. I was definitely very harsh on myself during those moments, but it was the only thing that I could see at the time. That was probably the beginning of what like this I guess like depression phase started for me, was knowing that I wasn't going to be the same like ever again. And there was no conversation as to like, hey, we're in 6 months I'm going to put you in a prosthetic, in a year you're going to be running, in 2 years you're going to be back to the Marine Corps. There was no conversation about that. There was like, we need to get you prepped for the next surgery, and we need to make sure you're going to be sustained, you're not going to get infections. We're going to clean out your amputation site until that starts to heal. I mean, such a long process of just waiting from the next medical step to the next medical step, that there was no conversation of what was going to happen after that. So it was depressing for
So the
sure.
doctors are basically taking it, we're just looking at today. We're
Yeah,
not looking 6 months down the road, 6 years down the road. We need to address today.
absolutely.
Now, the extent of your total injuries, because somebody can see, well, maybe they can't see,
Yeah.
scars on your arms. So what was the totality of the other injuries besides?
Yeah, so from my left side was immediately amputated. It was just below the knee is where I could kind of see most of the damage. When I got to the hospital, they made the decision to make me above the knee just because the severity of the injury. My right leg from the knee all the way up to where my hip was completely torn open, so they had to do a lot of muscle repair there, and that entire right thigh is covered by a skin graft. So I have full function of that. That piece turned out okay. My left thumb, unfortunately, we was taken all the way back, almost amputated itself. They managed to put that together. I had a couple of surgeries to get, full function of that. The radial nerve in my arm got cut so severe that I lost full function of the arm for the first year and a half. So it
In the
kind of
right arm.
in the right arm, yeah. So it completely atrophied, and they created a sling for it so that way it'd sit comfortably, but I couldn't use it for the first year and a half. So I couldn't do things like dress myself, tie a shoe. I had very limited use of my dominant hand, which was my writing hand. So I mean, my body was catastrophically like not useful at all. Sitting in a wheelchair, can't push yourself. Even something as simple as using the restroom or trying to get something to eat, was very difficult for the first year. And that time, was a long time to be sort of like in that state of like, I don't know if I'm ever going to come out of this, or like, is this the rest of my life where I'm going to need constant care? And, how am I supposed to enjoy? And I was 22 years old at the time. So be 22 and really young, and to have to, understand, or maybe for me, not even understand what life was going to be like after that was definitely a challenge.
How many total surgeries while you were at Walter Reed?
22. Well, at Walter Reed, there were probably like 15. And then by the time we were done with all the surgeries, we were at 22.
And how long did you stay at Reed before they sent you back out?
I was only there for 3 months. So they gave me a choice. They were like, hey, you can definitely stay here with Wounded Warrior Battalion East and do your recovery, or we can send you to our West Coast facility, which is at the Naval Medical Center. Because my parents lived in Phoenix, Arizona, they had already spent enough time with me at the hospital, as well as with my wife. I felt like it was better to go back to the West Coast. So they were like, okay, let's get you ready. We won't get you integrated into what things we do here on the East Coast. We'll go ahead and transfer you, and you can start, or at least finish your recovery there.
You talked about it and used the word kind of the depression period. You got the initial rationalization. Man, lost my leg, got a right arm that won't work at all. what was the turning point though for you from an internal mental side that you went, nah, screw this. I'm fighting this and I'm going to get back at it.
I saw a picture in the prosthetics room, first appointment that we go in there to get fitted. This is maybe about 4 months after I'm done with the initial healing process at the Naval Medical Center. And they say, hey, about the times when we kind of want to get you fitted for a prosthetic. And you go into that room, you meet all the staff and they're great. And on the wall, there's a picture of a double amputee, a corporal of Marines who also got injured by an IED. And he's back in Afghanistan.
This October 28th and 29th, the Military Officers Association of America is bringing together 3,000 voices, military leaders, warfighters, veterans, and families at National Harbor in Maryland for their inaugural conference, Total Force Plus. This isn't just another military conference. It's a mission to advance solutions for our military and veteran community, including leadership development, quality of life, military transition, and maximizing the veteran's experience. It's all on the table. This is where the next generation of military solutions will be tackled, at the first and only military conference where people outrank everything. And because the mission is so important, MOA is making attendance free for those who are currently serving, the spouses of those currently serving, and all federal employees within the DoD and VA. Secure your seat now, as tickets are limited and offered on a first-come, first-served basis. Visit TotalForcePlus.org to see if you qualify for your free ticket and to register for the conference.
And I'm like, I didn't even know that was possible. Like, no one had up to that point not even mentioned that a life, in the Marine Corps could exist after being catastrophically injured. So I look at the picture, I read the story, and I'm just like, man, this is okay. That's what I want to do. And it was just an idea in the back of my head. I knew at the time I couldn't pressure my parents or my wife or anybody else, that they were like, no, like, are you crazy? Like,
here
never.
you go, keeping secrets again.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, like holding it to myself. And that was really the first time that I thought about staying in the Marine Corps and figuring out what that was like. And I went back and I talked to the section leader that was in charge of me at the hospital. And I said, what do I have to do to stay in the Marine Corps? And he's like, are you serious? He was like, yeah. He's like, I mean, it's a long road. He's like, it's a long process. He's like, but if you want to do it, I have to start the paperwork now. Otherwise, you'll get to a point where you'll go to your med board and I won't have enough time to kind of interdict that, and you'll follow the process of being medically retired. So I was like, just start it. Can I make a decision to cancel it after? He's like, absolutely. He's like, I'm just telling you, if we don't do this now, you won't have an opportunity later. And I was like, just do it now.
Silly question. Prior to that, from the Marine Corps standpoint, had anybody ever directly said or kind of implied like, hey man, you're done, you're just going to heal up and be out?
Absolutely. That was everybody's initiative, was to make sure that I got through recovery well enough to be discharged.
And I mean,
from the hospital.
out from the Marine Corps, like.
Yeah, like completely discharged. That was always, so the physical evaluation board was like, hey, this date is going to come. It's set for 2 years because that's kind of what you need based off of your injuries. It's I think it was like October of 2012 of October. It was after 2011. So I basically got 2 years to recover, and then they were like, okay, this is your end date. But I saw that date coming. I was like, I don't know if that's going to be real enough for me. Like, I know what I want. I want to go back to being in the Marine Corps, whatever that means. So yeah, there was always the expectation of like, you're going to be medically retired. There was no conversation of like, here's the process for, if you raise your hand, we'll put you through the process. It was better, I think, for the Marine Corps, whether that's logistically or administratively, to follow that process as it has been so since World War II Marines came home and followed that same process of their military service. So that was always the initiative for sure.
Well, you got to figure the greater majority of people who get injured to the level that you get injured probably aren't thinking, man, I want to figure out a way to get back in and get back after it. And I don't mean this in a quitting way. I don't mean, there's the reality of, man, I'm jacked up. I need to figure out how I'm best going to preserve myself for the remainder of my life.
Yeah.
So that day you walked in and saw that picture, was how much time did you have until that October date that you were looking at?
It was somewhere between like 8 and 9 months. It was very, very, very short. So every day since then, I began telling everybody, and I remember telling my wife, if this is something I can do, like, I really want to do this. And we were already gearing, we were preparing for like, hey, if Naval Medical Board comes down and says, hey, unfortunately, there's no capacity for you, or whatever, they find as an answer to say no. We were also prepping for that. So there's a preparation to just be medically retired. Um, I don't remember the exact day. I know it was probably sometime after Christmas in 2011. They were like, "Hey, you have permission to do, basically like a tour of either MCRD, Miramar, Camp Pendleton, Edson Range, or 29 Palms or Yuma to figure out if there's a job and position that you'd like to partake and to see, what we can do to get you there." And I took it full heart. I went to Camp Pendleton, it's a range, MCRD, and there were jobs that were there, but they weren't jobs that I felt like were going to meet what I felt like was going to push me to advance myself as a person, as a Marine, and as a leader. And so Miramar was just it was a massive base. There's tons of activity there. I felt like the base was just a good place to be, and it was close proximity to San Diego and the Naval Medical Center. So that was the place that I chose.
In a weird way, did figuring out what your next not only duty station but duty assignment was going to be, did it play into the mental motivation of getting yourself back to a point where you could be cleared for active duty? Does that make sense? Giving yourself that challenge of, hey, I need to find something you mentioned that's going to challenge me as a leader and challenge me professionally and all that aspect, but something that's going to give you that, I need that, the carrot at the end of the stick to push myself to get there.
I feel like that definitely was. If they told me, hey, you got assignments to be at an S1 shop at, such place in at command, I probably would have just taken it and been like, okay, and then very quickly probably would have made the choice of like, this probably isn't what I want. But because they were like, if this is where you want to go, like this is what you need to do to achieve it. You got to go to DC and sit in front of a board. You got to be able to do a PFT. You got to be able to function, cognitively, and you got to pass, psych evaluation boards. So if this is truly what you want, these are the demands you have to meet. And I felt like that gave me a stepping stone, sort of like a sense of purpose again to get back to where I needed to be, which was being on active duty.
Rhetorically asking this question, but how was that process getting back ready for a PFT? Obviously, there was a lot of pain and a lot of adjustment to a prosthetic, but how did that process go for you?
It was challenging. There were no set rules in the Marine Corps about what an amputee was supposed to run for a PFT or what the swim qualification looks like or how they're going to pass the next, because I hadn't gone to sergeant's course before. I'd been to corporal's course before and TSULC, which was the Lance Corporal version of that leadership course. And there were no rules for it. They were like, okay, you're an amputee. It says EPLD in your status, so you're not PLD status, which means you're getting ready to getting out of the Marine Corps. You're EPLD. So what does that mean? I was like, well, it's just extended so I can stay in the Marine Corps. So I asked, the instructors, the senior leadership of my Marine Corps command at the time. I was like, don't treat me any other different than you would a normal Marine. If we get to a point and we both physically see that I can't achieve something, maybe then we can call and say, we'll find a safer route for you in order to complete an objective. But I did everything exactly to the standardization as to what the Marine Corps expected. I just did it with one leg. So when you put it in that perspective, there was this sense of like, if I could do this as an amputee, like there should be no reason there should be any Marine out here that shouldn't be able to do this. So there was kind of like this assertiveness that was happening at the same time, that really motivated me to go back to, if I can run a PFT as a Marine to the left and right of me, what's to say that, that doesn't, open up more doors and opportunity for me. So it's kind of like this momentous, like, ball of movement that was happening for me at the time. And the only thing I was really trying to focus on was, where can I function and where can I also still achieve like what I'm trying to do as far as a career in the Marine Corps.
It would be easy to say that the prosthetic in that leg would be the hardest thing to get operational again. But you also mentioned that your right arm was completely dead to the point it atrophied.
That's right.
In the process of getting all of your pieces operational again, which gave you the biggest hurdles to overcome?
I would definitely say re-strengthening my right arm. Once they figured out, once they did some initial tests, which were quite painful because they can actually listen to the nerves in your body, but they need to probe that. So they don't do it, outside of your body. They take a needle and they push it into where the nerve should exist, and they listen to the feedback from you as if you were to move your arm in certain areas. So they were like, hey, there's feedback on this radial nerve that you have in your arm. There's a good chance it's probably going to get back. So we, set up a plan with occupational therapy. Okay, this is what he needs in order to get that arm functional again. And it was just, it was like a roadmap. Hey, you show up every day and I'll make your arm functional. Prosthetics, same way. Hey, you show up every day and make sure you're fit, your function, the form is good and ready for you to go into that direction. So everybody was really kind of just encompassing it, making sure that I was going to achieve my goal. So I almost can say like, yes, I was going to do anything possible to get there, but without anybody really understanding what I was trying to do and them taking their own initiative and their own levels of profession to say, hey, this is what this guy wants and we're going to help him get there. I've never seen that kind of like level of like true love and care, one for their level of profession, but two, the level of care to make sure that they gave me what I needed in order to be successful. You just don't get that anywhere else. And those are some of the things that I carry forward even to this day is, you see somebody who needs help and you can help them or at least introduce them to people that can, you do it all. And you don't care whether they achieve that or whether they fail or they maybe choose a different direction. You could give them something completely free and they might not ever use it, but the initiative wasn't to make sure that, you feel good about yourself because you did something for them. The good feeling is that you gave them the opportunity to achieve what they wanted to achieve. And for me, the success story, I still see some of the therapists that I see, out, in the civilian world, and they were like, you were something different. Like there was something about you. Like you came in here every single day. You even came after we told you were done with the session, and you were like, we need to do this one more time because I fell, this entire time we were trying to get used to this prosthetic, and the only thing in my head was like, you just want to get walking, you want to get running, you want to get back to doing like this operational type thing. And they gave a little bit of themselves to me to achieve that.
How hard was it to develop I'll call it the coordination to run with a prosthetic?
Super hard, super hard. And I learned very quickly at full speed that, we couldn't do certain things in a prosthetic. But adaptive sports was great. When Warrior Battalion had the Warrior Games, Prince Harry with the European side developed the Invictus Games. So we had the Department of Defense Warrior Games here in the U.S., which got all branches of service to compete against each other. And then Prince Harriet was like, "Hey, this is amazing. I don't see this in my country. I want to make this a global effort." So he made the Invictus Games, and I competed in hand cycling, in track, in wheelchair basketball, and in swimming. So I got it very, very adaptive with my level of training in sports, and that's really also what helped me stay physically in shape when it came to, hey, you got to run 3 miles today. I was like, okay, no problem. You got to do a hike, with the prosthetic based off of, what we're doing today with the 3rd Marine Air Wing Unit. And, just so many different things that are just being thrown at you. I don't know. Like I said, in boot camp, I was less about the physical side. I was like, okay, how do we get there? The mentality of it all. And, I've carried so many people with me that are a part of me that they've given when I was in recovery at the Naval Medical Center. I kind of like owe it to them. Like I always go back and say like, because of you guys, and I make sure I'm very like sincere when I say that. I don't just say like, man, thank you so much for helping me. And then, walk away. I physically look them, in the eye and I tell them, you guys were foundational at building where I came from and adding to the person that I'm still becoming. And I'll always go back and either, I can't pay it back because I can't go back in time, but I can pay it forward. I can give this to somebody else. I can be there. This helps me be a better dad, a better husband, a better friend to people out there. This helps me go back to my own community and say, in the military and say, hey, what do you guys need? What can I do for you? If it's something as simple as like, hey, I need, a new dress shirt because, I'm a Lance Corporal and I spend all my money on something else. And, you do stuff like that because you want them to be successful too.
Am I understanding correctly that based on the new MOS you chose, they had to develop the PFQ for that assignment? So it wasn't a standard PFQ for all amputees, disabled Marines to get back to active duty. They have to actually create a PFQ just for you?
That's correct. Yeah, the program was very vague. It really didn't exist until I started going through it, which was why there was more circumstances, more paperwork, more everything to get you in. And so the Marine that I had saw in the prosthetics room, the picture I think was taken in 2009, so a year even before. So his time in recovery was probably even before that. I think he was injured in like 2007 from an IED, and 2009, 2 years later, he's sitting in Afghanistan with both prosthetics on. He's in more on the admin side, which is Like, again, I'm still, in Afghanistan doing what Marines do. And so there was no set program, but creating the EPLD program, there were people in the Marine Corps that were like, there's no way that it exists. Like, your orders are wrong. Like, you shouldn't even be here. Like, let's figure out where this guy is going to go. And, the command would come back and, pick up the phone and say, no, he's exactly where he's in sergeant's course. He's an amputee. There's no rules or regulations to say that he's not allowed to be here. Treat him as you would any normal Marine and accommodate him as much as possible. And that was it. And even then, I was held to the same educational standards, the same physical standards, the same leadership standards. I was pushed, and it was such a privilege, like, and I see Marines still now like, oh, we went through sergeant's course with you. And dude, we honestly did not ever want to stop or give up, because you were out here killing yourself after you just survived being almost killed. Like, we could never say that we had enough either. Every day you showed up, you were calm, you were present, you were professional. There was something about you that we wanted to be around you. So I take that, wholeheartedly.
So you mentioned Miramar. What did you actually pick as your new duty assignment?
So I'm doing tour to tour. I'm going to each shop, and we're talking to senior, the leadership of the Marines, and I only walk into this one. We talked to the mechanics, we talked to the ordnance guys, we talked to avionics techs, the guys who are command and control in the center, supply chain, all these. And I was like, I don't know. I go to this one room and everybody's in coveralls and they're just chilling. iHeartRadio's playing. There's, got some officers in there, and this guy's doing a check on his parachute. And he's, it seems technical. They're all serious about it, but for the most part, it's very relaxing environment. And I was like, what do these guys do? And he's like, I don't think you want to go here. I was like, but what do they do? He's like, oh, this is Flight E, flight equipment technicians. And I was like, but what do they do? He's like, they repair and manually put together and fit all of the aviation equipment that the fighter pilots use while they're in the plane. And I was like, damn, that sounds pretty cool. I was like, so what do I got to do to come here? He's like, well, spend 2 weeks with them, let them, talk to you about the job, encompass it, and then we'll figure out what it takes to send you to school for this. So I sit with them for 2 weeks, and they were the most like educated, relaxed, Marine guys, like, cared about, every piece of history we had in the Marine Corps, outside of what I saw in the infantry, where we were more just on the operational staying, ready as ever. And they were just a good group of guys. Like, it's kind of like I went into the shop, they accepted me. And so that was the job that I chose, was to be a 6048, which was a flight equipment technician.
Any concerns or reservations on your part? And I'm immediately, what comes to mind is the dexterity and mobility of your hands and being able to do that type of work. Any concerns on your part?
No. I think it was pretty easy. So, like, I was grown up very cultural, very artistic, language, performances, that sort of thing. So coming into that shop, it was honestly, there was a lot of sewing.
I meant from the injuries. Were there any concerns about being able to?
No, occupational therapy was like, final test, we're going bowling. Okay. And they were like, if you can bowl with the arm that you normally bowl with, I think you're going to perform, we don't have any issues. And that was it. We went down to MCRD, the little bowling range that they have there, and they're like, let's bowl. So it sucked because I had to play it off like I wasn't hurting, like throwing down these bowling balls down. But we got through every bit of being functional, and that comes with being fully medically evaluated. And this is why the board was enacted in DC, where you'd fly these guys out and say, hey, for one, we want to make sure from a physical standpoint that every doctor that you've seen based off your injuries can mark the check on the box, say fit for duty. If there's any line in there that says fit for duty, but, or fit for duty, such and such reason, we might have some reservations about that. But when you sit in front of that board and they look at it and all these check marks are across the board, they're like, okay, like, what makes you want to stay in the Marine Corps? Like, why do you want to stay a Marine? And the only answer that I could give to them, I was like, because I've been given more going to this level of recovery, that I feel like there's more of me yet to be had for other people. And I feel like my leadership skills can't just be, shifted to the side. I want to be able to contribute back to the Marine Corps. And there was no better answer for them. It wasn't just like, I want to go back to freaking Afghanistan. I want to go back to killing bad guys. Like, whatever it was, there was just this contribution, this initiative that I wanted, whatever I was given, to give it to somebody else. And that's honestly, I don't think they had an answer for that. They signed my paperwork. I got on a flight back to San Diego, and they were like, okay, here's your check-in date. here's your new staff sergeant, here's your report to, and here's your peers for the next couple of years that you'll be with here at Miramar. And it was like a 9 to 5 job. I think that was probably what I needed best. And I will say the Marine Corps signed off on it, but let's get back to the other half of my command. My wife at the time was like, if I let you stay, and it was like, if I let you stay in the Marine Corps, because I've been here now for all these deployments, I've gone through this injury, we're starting to have a family now. At the time, my wife was pregnant with our third child, and she was like, if I let you, and we were about to have 4 altogether, and she was like, if I let you stay in the Marine Corps, I need you to understand, like, I can't have you take any risks that would not allow you to come home. And I was like, man, like, because I had in the back of my head, hey, do a year here at Miramar and let's go back to freaking, let's go do something else. Because that was it. They were like, hey, you can stay here for a year, and then we're going to do a service contract extension for that. So I did the year there, and she was like, I know if you go back to
those early days, you're actually thinking get reassigned to a combat?
Get reassigned back to a combat unit. Either you can make me a turret gunner, I can work with weapons, we can do all sorts of stuff, right?
I'm sure you kept that secret.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't, and I was at that time, I knew I had to be honest, and I was like, okay, if I do go back to an infantry battalion, like, and she was like, if you do that, she's like, I promise you, I'm not going to stay with you. She's like, because you can't go through this whole regiment again where you got to be gone for X amount of months. We now have children to think about, and I want you to be home. She's like, I think I've done enough. Stay a Marine, but find different places where you can, come home every day. And so that's what I chose. I was like, hey, I found a cool job. It's at Miramar. I get to freaking salute jets in the morning, and unfortunately, walk in a line and pick up every single little piece of stuff that's on the tarmac. But it was such a good experience. I mean, doing runs with those guys, going to the ranges with them, doing the small makeshift hikes on flat ground, the hard, air wing life, and learning all the things that they were very serious about, taking care of the fighter pilots, being engaged with these officers in a way that was very personal that I had never seen before, because you got to, take these officers in, talk about all the things that they're going to be operationally to make sure that they're fit for flight, and take care of all of their equipment that they have to trust in case something goes wrong with their parachute, the ejection seat, their G suit, respiratory systems, cranial survival suits, all those things. And you're just like, man, like, this is actually a very serious job to have. So it wasn't that the environment was relaxing, but yeah. So the Marine Corps signed off on that whole piece, but it really was,
real quick. You mentioned walking the flight line.
Mm-hmm.
Is physically walking and policing the flight line more tradition or necessity? Because if you're trying to pick up the little things, obviously, that could impact a plane, tires, all that type stuff, couldn't a machine do it? Like, couldn't they just drive the quote unquote flight line?
You would think so, but I think that there's more of a human trust into doing that than you would allow a machine. If there was a catastrophic injury and you found some autonomous piece of equipment missed something because it just missed something, I think there's better trust in having a physical person, take care of a job like that. It's almost like aircraft mechanics. If you requested a specification for a type of repair, and a machine for whatever malfunctioning reason missed it and it caused catastrophic loss of life, you would then go back to saying, if there was a person there doing that, and then there's all these different checks for a human standpoint, we probably could have mitigated that. You could combat that in a couple of different ways, but I think that, autonomy goes a long way. I do work in the defense industry. Autonomy does go a long way. But at the end of the day, there does need to be a person behind that, driving and making sure that the parameters or the safety aspects are also being met.
I just wonder if there's a little bit of it, and I don't mean this in a negative way. I wonder if it's a little bit of the history, the tradition. Hey, sometimes to use and I'll say excuse, it's the way we've always done it, is not the right way to think about it. But then there's a part of it where I wonder if being part of that flight crew, that's part of its history, that's part of its tradition. And we hold on to that tradition by doing this also.
Yeah. I think it just comes down to, if we've never had an issue with it, like if it's not broke, why fix it?
Right.
There is the initiative of saying, well, how can we make this better? Why didn't we have those range rollers that picked up all that brass from the range, and we're sitting there on our hands and knees putting stuff inside of our covers, and then dumping that into a bucket manually, definitely. And I think it just comes down to maybe there's certain aspects of keeping us involved,
Right.
and situationally aware gives us the opportunity to maybe not be complacent in areas that we would if we created comfortability, if we created ease of access to equipment that made our lives easier, that might gear us to be a little bit more complacent later on down the road. So the more uncomfortableness that you have inside of any command, I think kind of helps breed and make sure that you maintain a level of discipline.
So your first day back to full duty was what date?
Well, I did the first 2 weeks. This was probably this was definitely after February 14th, because that was Valentine's Day. It was a good Valentine's Day. Probably like February 16th was the day that I fully got checked in. And Stephen Valdez, who became my brother-in-law later on, is one who checked me in and was like, "Welcome to Miramar. Like, not much happens here, but what we do is pretty serious." So he walked me around to all the places that I need to collect gear from in order to be there and at that shop at the.
Is this 2013?
This is at the end of 2012.
Okay.
Yep, 2012 is when I got orders when I officially got orders and said, "Hey," well, because I was there like on like a OJT basis. They're like, "We're just gonna send you there. Once you have your orders, you're already there. You're integrated. You can go as normal. So you're not just waiting here at the Naval Medical Center, barracks room to go there. You can just OJT there. We'll give you temporary assigned orders to that command, and then once your orders come through, they'll sign off all the paperwork, and you've already been there, so it should be okay."
So that I can understand the calendar. While you're going through the process of recovering from your injury, does your second enlistment technically end, or are you still in that second enlistment?
Technically, it ended. So if we go from 2008 to 2012, it ended. So that's where we did the extension. So they're like, "Hey, this first year is kind of like a trial. Make sure everything works for you. Everything's good. After we get to the end of 2012, you have the option to fully extend. We're going to give you an extension for 3 years." So that first year is kind of a part of it, 2012, and then it's 13, 14, 15, and 16. That's the third enlistment.
So did you end up doing you did a full 20, correct?
I got out at 12 years.
Oh, okay. So my misunderstanding, you didn't go ultimately a career.
Right.
Why not continue then all the way?
That is a very good question. I felt at the time, after doing all the things that I was allowed to do on active duty, train, do all the physical activities, advance myself career-wise, graduate second in sergeant's course. Like had just great, phenomenal experience. My kids were, my family life was becoming a lot more demanding. And I felt like the Marine Corps wasn't combat orientation anymore, or combat orientated, I should say. And I just didn't feel like there was this drive to keep me. I knew I wasn't not going to go back to combat. Otherwise, I was going to, roll the dice on keeping my family and keeping, the sanctity of that, intact. So I told myself, like, maybe the grass is greener on the other side. Maybe it's time that, I take this big chance, something that I was very fearful of, because the only thing that I knew from technically the time that I was a child to, the time that I was getting ready to retire, I didn't know what life like was going to be on the outside. I only knew the Marine Corps. That's why I wanted to go back to it. And the day came. It was June 29th in 2016. I was at the nice parade deck over at what is that place in Point Loma, and I got retired. It was the most awkward feeling in the whole world. When you go to Camp Pendleton and you sit in that office to collect your DD-214, and you can take, your Marine Corps cami cap off and, put a baseball cap on that says United States Marine Corps veteran, and you leave Camp Pendleton for what would seem like the last time, and you're like, "Oh man, what am I going to do now? Like, can I just like hang out at the barracks, or maybe is my command, are they going to call me?" And like, nothing. No one calls you and says, "Hey," after the retirement, of course, you get all the congratulations, good job, good luck. If you need anything, let me know. But the day after, like, that service ends, there's nothing. It's hey, make sure you check into the VA so that way you can get your follow-on care if you need to. Stop by the DEER's office and get your retired IDs, so you still have access to, like the commissary and the PX, and that was it. So I had no, like, what are we going to do now? There were some small things we did, like write a resume and maybe take some transitional courses about, trade school and college and stuff like that. but I really had no initiative like plan. I was not planning for that specific day. I was planning for maybe a life afterwards, but I really didn't know what that was going to be.
That, and I'll use the figurative, the next day, whether it was a week later, a month later, the next day, when you had that rationalization, because you were in an awkward spot in the sense that what motivated you to get out was the fact that you didn't have that drive any longer to be able to be a combat Marine.
Yeah.
So that wasn't fulfilling you anymore. So you're like, okay, this isn't driving me. Let me go be a civilian and figure out what I'm going to do. When that day, and like I say, it could have been the very next day, it could have been but when you had that rationalization of, damn, I'm a civilian, I'm not a Marine anymore. How was that for you?
I was definitely super sad again. I think
And when did it come?
Like the very next day, I was just like, this sucks. Like, I feel like I was kicked out of my own party, like I think it was just like the safety catch, knowing that no matter what, I was needed on base. I was needed for muster. I was needed for roll call. I was needed to, attend the class at the Bob Hope, theater facility. I had, some training to get to. There was always something that was going to happen and I needed to be there. So I never had to worry about like, what do I have to do this week, to make sure that, we get stuff rolling on. Like everything was just sort of always, I think, planned and taken care of from that initiation standpoint. So the next day when there was no like, hey, like, I think I'm late for formation. Like, oh, you don't have formation today. Like, oh, like let me call, Staff Sergeant so and so or Gunny so and so and ask them, what they got planned for the day for, the junior guys, and there is none of that anymore. So I think that was just like the very first day. I remember I was still in base housing because they give you a little bit of leeway before moving you out, and I was still there, and I was like, this feels weird. Like I technically I can't put camis on anymore. I could have around the house, but I'm not gonna put camis on anymore. And that was the first day I was like, okay, like what are we gonna do? And one of the odd things that happened is that I had some heterotrophic ossification bone buildup around my amputated side that was causing a lot of like tears within my limb if I made prolonged periods of trying to be in my leg. So the Marine Corps didn't want to do the surgery while I was in because they were afraid that if we did it, that if an infection happened, if we needed to shorten the length, if something crazy happened and with after surgery, that I would actually prolong my time being or trying to get a medical retirement. They didn't want that. So they're like, hey, we can do the surgery here, but you have to be fully retired. So that was kind of like first 3 months. I was just like, okay, I know a surgery's coming, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like it was such a like lost period. Surgery happens. I recover within like 4 months. I'm back to putting on a prosthetic, way better quality of life. So things kind of improve. And then I get a random phone call. My wife is good friends with another wife within the housing we live into. Her husband works at a manufacturing facility, and they're like, "Hey, like they're looking for like this a project manager, and we wanted to. Marcus is out now. Like, do you think he can apply to a job?" And there was no like, "Hey, I'm gonna go look for a job." Like, I can't wait to get back in college. It was kind of just like a, "What am I gonna do now?" kind of thing. So I took that as a job just because it came to me. So I was working there at this manufacturing facility as a project manager.
Silly question real quick. Was there ever a point where you considered going back in, and did you get to a point where you were too far out and through the process where you couldn't go back in?
No, I think at that time it wasn't that I was giving up on my career as a Marine. I was just more interested on what life was like outside of that because the day-to-day stuff was just, show up at Miramar, do some repairs, have a little bit of training here and there and then go home. So there was less of a like, hey, like today we got range training. Hey, today you got to get your Marines through, such and such course. So the operational side was definitely kind of diminishing, and it was more of like, what are the day-to-day activities of Marine Corps life at Miramar? So kind of less of a pace that I became accustomed to. Like they were like, you could stay here, you can shift to, we have different air facilities across the US. And I was just like, I think I'm kind of tired now. Like, my prosthetic is held up as phenomenally as it did. And my fighting spirit is definitely still there, but I don't know how I'm supposed to exist in more of like a garrison type Marine Corps because we stopped doing combat operations. We stopped doing heavy deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. We were losing our as an organization. I felt like we were losing our reason why to stay so sharp every single day. With new guys coming in, with commands shifting, everything in the Marine Corps, and you saw it. And I felt like I was getting more into trouble because I was questioning the lackadaisical side. I was like, why, why are we allowing Marines to do this? Why are we allowing Navy guys to do this? Like we have, fat bodies out here not passing PFTs. We have, trouble, and it started to show that we were losing sort of like an initiative as a culture in the Marine Corps. And so I was like, well, if they don't need, hard chargers like me anymore, maybe, someplace else I can go to. And I thought about law enforcement or maybe firefighting or high stress kind of job. But those first 3 months, it was unsettling because I was like, even though I had this initiative to go do something else great, I was literally stuck in a weird limbo of like, well, I just lost, my entire family in the Marine Corps and people that I loved, and they all have this initiative that they're driving forward, that I wasn't a part of anymore. So that was probably the hardest part.
That was the basis of my question. That period where you're out before, maybe even after you got that project manager job. But what I'm getting at is you're out, you're realizing, man, I missed this. There was that part of me that really kind of fed my soul. Was there ever a point where you thought about going in, but you couldn't because you were too far removed or too far gone? Does that make sense?
I mean, honestly, if people ask me now, like, hey, the Marine Corps needs you, would you go? I'd say, yeah, in a heartbeat, let's go. Where do you
But
need
you
me?
never actively considered looking at that option of going back in.
No, I think when I told my wife, like, I think it's time, she was like, thank God, like we've been waiting for this day for a long time. So now, and the longer we spent out, the longer we become accustomed to, like, we kind of made a better
Right.
decision for ourselves. So I think there was less of a challenge of asking myself, like, man, like if I would have just stayed in, like things would have been different, or if I would have just stayed in, like, my life would have been better at some point. I think getting out was definitely the right decision at the right time. And it came just as like a, hey, you're at 12 years, like, what do you want to do? Like, do you want to, we can re-enlist you. You got all these different options. And I kind of went back to that whole, with the struggle to stay in, the struggle to get physically well. And there was all of that, like the carrot at the end, both times. And there just wasn't, they're like, hey, this is the next level for you in the Marine Corps. And I felt like it just wasn't there for me anymore. So I decided let's hang this up and see what the other side is like.
So was the first job afterwards that project manager position?
Yeah, which sucked because I had no training, no qualifications. I didn't even know what a project manager was. I just went in there the way the Marine Corps does in any new command position. I was like, all right, you guys line up. I want all this trash taken out. And there people were like, what? Like, who the hell is this guy? Like, it was like when you get the drill instructor back from, in the field, he's with his first command after being a drill instructor for his first, couple of cycles, and he's done with his tour. And you're just like, man, like, we don't do stuff like that here, I wouldn't say I got in trouble a lot. I was definitely corrected a lot because they were like, hey, you can't call people bitch, or you can't say certain things, or you can't use the F word when you're describing somebody. I was like, but it's universal. I'm not, there's no gender here. I could just say, hey, you, and it was true for me. And I survived that job, I think like 6 months, and I got fired. They were like, it's just not working out here for us. Thank you.
You don't fit.
Yeah, you don't fit in. And I got fired from that place. And at the same time, I was like, man, thank God. Like, I thought I was going to be there until, Marines don't quit. When things get hard, when you're challenged, whether it's good or bad, you there's something inside you just says, I'm not going to quit here. So I didn't look to like, man, this place sucks. Like, I don't know what these guys don't listen. There's a bunch of kids here. Like, we've got all these safety hazards everywhere. Like, I'm going to quit this place. For me, I was like, okay, what can we do to fix all this stuff? So being fired was like a blessing. I was like, man, thank goodness. Shortly after that, I wanted to go back to school. At the same time, we had worked at the Naval Medical Center with recreational therapy to bridge a channel with the San Diego Zoo. And the channel is that during recreational therapy, before the zoo opened, we had the opportunity to go to the zoo and explore the zoo grounds before any of the public was allowed to be there. So we were given sort of like special access in a very calm environment, allowing us to kind of just, in the hospital, I wouldn't say it's chaotic and hectic, but there's a lot of moving parts. There's therapy, there's staff, there's all these different things. Out in the civilian world, when you try to go and you're just starting to get used to your abilities with the prosthetic or a wheelchair, or you're limited on mobility and it takes you a long time to get in and out of places, going to the zoo before it opened was perfect. There was hill environments, there was the aspect of the animals, there were care providers there that talked about conservation efforts and certain things. So we built a relationship with them throughout my time at the San Diego Zoo, where we're always doing constant visits in between the time that I was trying to get back to the Marine Corps. And there was a gentleman there by the name of Bob Dylan. He was also a Marine, served in Vietnam. He was, I believe, an officer, a captain at the time, and he welcomed us with open arms. He's like, "Hey, I want to create a program here where we cater to the hospital, and if you guys have a name for it." And the recreational therapist was like, "How about the Wild Heroes program?" And that's exactly what it became. Before it became that program, that's what they were calling it through the hospital. But at the zoo, it was just, hey, we're having some special guests today. We're going to take care of them and accommodate them. Bob Dylan reached out to me shortly after that when I was in school and was like, "Hey, I have this kind of random idea that got pitched to me by another lady who's been working with you guys at the safari park, and she has a couple positions there she'd like to see filled, and she wanted to know if you would if you could have a conversation with her." So I went down to, or I went up to the safari park and checked into this facility, and I was like, "Hey, like Bob Dylan sent me up here, Marcus Chischilly. He said you have a job opportunity you wanted to talk about." She was like, "Yeah." She was like, "I have this idea to take the Wild Heroes program that exists at the Naval Medical Center and make it a full-time position here, an organization that's kind of governed inside of itself to put transitioning service members at the zoo." And I was like, "Damn, that sounds pretty good to me." I was like, "What do you need from me?" She's like, "Well, I need you to pilot the program. I need you to go around all these different zoo facilities, partake in all the different jobs, and you're an amputee, so you can say whether or not this be a good fit for somebody who has physical limitations. We don't discriminate here, so if you can do this in a wheelchair, we'll allow you within retrospects to safety and environment to allow you to do that. If you're in a prosthetic, if you're fully, ambulatory." So we put this program together. It was a great summer. I spent time in just about every place of the San Diego Zoo, from operations to cleaning to wildlife animal care to guys who serve in the veterinary field doing, I didn't do any surgeries while I was there, but got to see them do, small surgeries on different animals there. I mean, just tons of really crazy stuff.
What is the grind? It's not just a routine, but the decision we make to wake up, give everything we've got, then find a way to go further. Grind, spelt GRND, is more than a brand. It's a movement, an emotion we all feel connected to as we work daily to pursue our goals and support each other. Founded by a former Army Ranger, Grind Activewear has a clear mission: to give 100% and then some more. In sport, fitness, and in life. Functional, high-quality performance wear that's rooted in American culture. Because you demand gear that outworks the rest. Whether you're on the field, in the gym, or building your own lane, Grind is for those who refuse to settle. Go check out the Grind Collective. That's the grndcollective.com, and tap into something bigger than clothing. And while you're there, use the promo code TRANSITION15 to get 15% off your purchase.
And there's the side conversation to that with Global Conservation Force, which is also a huge portion of my bio as well. But I worked there for 5 years in just about every department that they had, from giving tours to operating the Sky Tram that they have, to giving personal tours, to hosting, entire events with Wounded Warrior Project and Semper Fi Fund. And that program was great. What ended it was COVID, unfortunately, because that program was funded through external means. And when the zoo got shut down, there was there wasn't a need to fund the program anymore. It exists today, but only in like on a file, so to speak. So if I was to go to the zoo today and say, "Hey, can you break open that file? I want to run a program with you guys," they would say, "Great, we can definitely do that. Let's figure out how to get it funded." Because most of the funds that are allocated for the zoo are for conservation efforts or wildlife care. So because catering towards a group of veterans for some sort of event there doesn't necessarily meet that, we have to be privately funded in order to do it. So I spent 5 years there. After that PM job, I left there, went to the zoo, got fully acclimated, and I give all the thanks to them to getting me sort of really transitioned away from the military mindset. Because now I was in a place where you had like the tree huggers, you had the anti-plastic, no, very, against, regulations for, gluten-free types, that all sorts of stuff I never would have thought about. And I got to be amongst these people every single day, and learn from the staff there, and learn from people who are doing efforts globally. and it was just a great try. I got to learn how to write my first email there because, my boss sent me an email. He's like, "Hey, did you get that email I sent you last week?" And I was like, "Email?" I was like, "What do you want? Like, you wrote me an email?" He's like, "Yeah, I wrote you an email." And I was like, I was like a Yahoo email. He's like, "No, like your Outlook." He's like, "Do you know how to access your Outlook?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "I don't even use my Outlook here." He's like, "Oh," he's like, "Okay." He's like, "Let's work on that." He's like, "I sent you a really important email." And then when my supervisor had found out, she was like, "Dude, when he sends you an email, you got to answer." And I was like, "Well, we didn't talk about us, ever sitting down and doing, emails together." So I was like, it was a new thing for me. Um, Taught me how to have customer courtesies with, general population, asking people nicely about things, understanding conflict management. Obviously some people might come with an attitude to the zoo, and your first Marine reaction comes out and you get hella defensive, and just to take, things in on a different approach. And
That's
it
not a
was
probably not a common class. Marine Corps conflict resolution is probably
no,
not one that they
yeah,
teach.
no, definitely not, definitely not. Yeah, it's yeah, for sure. I'm sure some of the write-ups there, if I was to ever bring them in and show it to you, you'd be like, "You did what?" And they didn't fire you? And I was like, "Well, I was a part of a program that was truly about transition and what that meant." And for Bob Dylan being a Marine, himself and other service members who were working within the zoo, everybody was super intrigued about the program. They were super helpful. They were like, "Yes, like if we can take a Marine, a service member like Marcus Chischilly, and envelop him in a world that has nothing to do with his experience as far as being in the military, and help him adapt to what life might be like outside in the civilian world, this would probably be no better place than to do it." And it's been a phenomenal experience, and I've had tons of guys go through that program on a transition level. Some ended very greatly, some, maybe not so much, but it's everybody's journey to their own. But the zoo is definitely a big part of that.
So what'd you transition to from there after that ended?
So once COVID hit, I wanted to go back to school again. So I only got to general education done while I was in school, while I was working at the zoo. I still didn't understand what I wanted to do. There was a trade school at the time. UEI College said, "Hey, we can stay open. You guys can come to school here. We can teach you remotely. You guys will have one lab day. We'll follow all the precautions." So I went back to school. I went to UEI, became an electronic technician. So basically doing electronics on the commercial side. So residential on commercial was the goal. COVID lifted, and there was a job position working for the convention center on networking capabilities. And because I had leadership qualities, there was a Marine that was working there, and he was like, "Hey, I think I have a different position that I'd like you to fulfill. It's in sales." And I was like, "Sales, really?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, I can work with you." He was also a Marine. And this was for Senko Advanced Components. They sold fiber optics and did fiber optic solutions for the United States here. So in all different facets. So learned tons of information with that company. Fell very much in love with networking and fiber and communications, telecommunications. And that was a job that I thought I was going to take into forever. But because telecommunications market and the industry just went up and it went down and went up and down after COVID, it was kind of hard to sustain some of the guys, the high level paying guys that were on the account management and sales side. And so unfortunately, they were like, "Hey, we're kind of downsizing the company." I got let go, and came as a recommendation to work for Fisher Connectors. So now I'm working in a defense industry, something I never thought I'd be doing, but still in the aspect of sales. On the sales side, it was very easy to pick up because one, it was about initiative, finding a level of discipline and learning everything about your trade possible to you for you to execute and be successful. Something I didn't know you could very easily do with email or working person to person or going to different companies and pitching a solution to them. So that became just like secondhand nature. And then I was trained by a Japanese salesman, so to speak. And it was great. Guys that were very serious about sales and technology and all these different things, and would definitely take me aside. I thought I would give them great presentation, saw customer, got great feedback, and they take me back and they were like, "Dude, if you gave that presentation to me," he's like, "I would have fired you." And I'm like, "Man, that's crazy." And it's like, "Well, what do I have to do?" And they'd go back and like nitpick certain things. So like, if you want to close, this $1 million deal, this is where you have to be. This is how you have to translate. This is the level of approach that you have to have. And so a very, very strict lifestyle. And it just changed. So we go from the zoo to COVID to communicate. Like I wanted to work in the electronics field to working in sales. So very, very different. But I've always had somebody come to me and say, "You know what? you're a little different. Like maybe if I pitch this idea to you, it could be something you could be a part of. That's the reason why I've had so many different jobs, because one job would be great and then I would learn about it and I'd be like, like I don't know, like in between, those important jobs, the PM to the zoo, to Senko, to Fisher Connectors, where I'm at now. There was USA Hazmat. I was a project manager for a hazmat company, which was freaking crazy. All those crazy stories. I worked for who else did I work for? The San Diego Convention Center for about 6 months. I worked for a pharma tech company doing your analysis, testing, and all the things that exist in the drug world. Um, I've done Uber. I mean, I've done all sorts of just random things to, provide for my family, trying to find this sense of purpose as to where I'm supposed to be. And now we work in the defense industry under Fisher Connectors. We sell connectivity solutions to both military defense organizations as well as the aerospace industry. So you got to be tech savvy, know your customers, know the market. And we know the defense industry here in the US is vast. It moves at the speed of light, technology, AI, integration, all these different, different facets of what I do as a job, which makes my job super fun. So when they talk about different levels of purpose, and ways that I meet that, one as a service member who understands how to use military equipment like communication systems, and guys like Andrel and AeroVironment who build munition type systems, how those may have a big impact or make a difference on the battlefield, to protection devices that guys wear in combat, ways that we can mitigate injury and stuff like that to lessen the lethality that happens in the field of combat. So it's been a tremendous journey for sure, but I wouldn't look back and change anything. So now I'm attempting to go back to school again one final time to get what do they call it, the an engineering degree in electronics. And the reason why is because most of the engineers that I talk to now that I have to quote unquote sell to in the defense industry are all engineers, either mechanical, electrical, or they're like PhD guys on a completely different level. So when we get down to the nitty gritty and they start talking about electrical impedances and sound and noise and wavelength and signal, and I'm just like, yeah, we can do that. I'm just like, I don't know what the hell we're doing, but it's my job to go out there, and so that's what's driving me to go back to college for an electrical engineering job, or schooling, I should say, degree.
From your, I'll call it recovery, in the sense, what's the future look like for you as far as your leg, your arm? Are you done, or do you anticipate, is there a natural progression where there may be more surgeries that are required? How's that window looking for you?
Yeah, sustainability for now is okay. I don't foresee myself taking on any kind of major surgery as far as
That one
my
little
injuries goes.
surgery on your
Mhm.
knee or at the amputation point that they did after you got out of the Marine Corps. So in theory, then that's it.
Should be good. Yeah. We tried to do a surgery on my ear to repair hearing. That didn't go so well. Kind of hearing stayed the same as far as injuries go. But everything else after that, I function just as normal. Health wise, I feel like I'm in pretty good shape.
Do you do anything staying connected to, and I'll give it the overall umbrella of the Wounded Warrior, because I think that what a lot of people recognize the name, but
Correct.
in that community, are you still active with anything like that?
Absolutely. So Wounded Warrior Battalion Regiment still exists here in the US, both East Coast and West, and then the guys out in the Pacific. And all the time I get emails saying, hey, we're running a class or a course in some Air Force base, usually at Andrews on the East Coast, and we're doing some sort of adaptive sports. I loved adaptive sports. I wasn't very athletic when I was in high school, just because my priorities were a little bit different as a sub provider of my family. And I loved adaptive sports. I got to learn how to play wheelchair basketball. I played for a Division I team here in San Diego for 3 years before I kind of gave that up. And this was a time where I gave up a lot of stuff to get my Marine Corps career back. So I was offered to go into the Paralympics in swimming and in track. I gave that up because my initiatives to stay with the Marine Corps. And I really loved doing marathons. So I've done 18 so far. I've done Boston Marathon, and these are all in the hand cycle division. So I haven't ran a full marathon yet. I've done 2 half marathons successfully. I haven't built the endurance. I would say the courage to get to that, because once you're at 13.1, you're like, man, forget whoever wants to do this again. No, 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 I'm good at 13.1.
Marathon's a different beast.
That's a different beast. So both mentality and I think physically, I think I'm more mentally scared than I am physically, because I can, I think we 2 Sundays ago we did a 13-mile run and I was like, okay, that wasn't that bad. Just cold run. But sports is definitely something we do a lot. We work with great organizations like the Achilles international team. They have a subdivision called the Freedom Achilles team, which is comprised of all military veterans in adaptive sports. Challenged Athletes Foundations. They always have different events that I participate in. What's the other one? I think there's only the two primary ones that I do stuff with. Because the Achilles international team, they're the ones who got me to complete Boston Marathon, one qualifying for that marathon in the hand cycle division, and then racing in Detroit, in New York, and LA, and San Diego. We've done a race in Colombia. There's a couple of races internationally that, if you're in that sport, you could participate in. But outside of that, sports was always such a fun thing. I'm not sure when I'll be able to return that, just because the capacity that I'm at now, where I'm trying to get my kids raised and well developed, get them educated, get them ready. My oldest now is my two older boys are 16, and I tease them all the time. I'm like, you guys got 2 more years and I can give you the boot. And they're like, what am I supposed to do? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, you know how to make ramen noodles, and like, so I tease them a lot. But it was that aspect, because I left home, when I was 17. I turned 18 just before, I got to boot camp, and there was just a different mentality. Whereas my 16-year-old's like sleeping at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, oh hell no! Like, what are we doing?
Either one of them thinking or talking about the military?
They actually both do. I'm a little against it, and the reason why is because I think I've sacrificed enough to where that isn't their first and only option. When I was in high school, I had just barely graduated high school. The initiative was my parents gave me, was like, just graduate high school. So when I got that index card, it's no wonder that college and trade school and other things weren't an option. That being a Marine was just, it was there in front of you. You didn't need to do anything. You just got to the Marine Corps and got to be a Marine, and that was a privilege. So my kids have a completely different outlook on life now that they're a lot older. Now that I'm a little bit older as well, I want them to have the college life first. I want them to maybe take a look at a job or something that is a skill set for them. And then if they want to be a Marine or any branch of service, that they have some sort of something of value to contribute as well. Not just get in there like I did. Well, we were in combat too, so it was a completely different setting. But I find the value of the military like post after they've got some life experience. Whether that's a 4-year college degree, doing, anything. I told them, you guys can be underwear and basket weavers. I don't care. You live a little bit before you commit to that lifestyle, because it's a commitment for sure. And then they're going to require so much from you that you might not have the opportunity to do other things until afterwards. And you might love it just like I did and want to stay for a prolonged period of time, whether that's 20 years or, past that. But the idea is to not limit their ability to, what's coming next. I'm like, hey, we've got avenues all everywhere, and I don't care if you try all of them. That's what I've sacrificed for. That's what, my wife, that's what your mom sacrificed for. So when they have that idea, like, okay, like, well, what do we do? They ask about driving, they ask about all these different things, about boyfriends and girlfriends. And
Hey, at least they have an interest in driving. Seems like a lot of younger kids today don't even have an interest in driving.
Well, we've sort of taken them back to the Navajo reservation tons of time. We've taught them traditionally where they come from, what culture is for them. We are Christians, but we also have Native American church there, which kind of delves into, some of the traditional styles of the way that we carry ourselves from a religious standpoint. So there's some I would say differences between them, but they're kind of aligned, lifelike. So we teach them both. And so when we go into the reservation in terms of driving, I'll get on the dirt road. I'm like, all right, let it rip. And they'll be like, what do you mean? Like, what am I doing? I'm like, I don't know. You see me do this every single day for the past 15 years. You would think. I was like, can you drive a golf cart? He's like, yeah, I've driven a golf cart. But I was like, this is no different. And it's just to get them to do it. We've done that plenty of times. Now they're like, hey, can I borrow the car? I'm like, yeah, right. Not yet. Like 6 more months, 16 and whatever the age limit is to get a permit and stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, it's life and every day. One question that I did get asked, I was at the Walter Reed last weekend with the current wounded warriors that are there. and we're sort of sitting like in a panelist thing, and one of the service members goes, "I have a question." The guy for with the prosthetic, he was talking to me, and actually we all had prosthetics. I think I was just the one with the single prosthetic, and he was like, "What advice would you give to me on how I can make my transition here better, so that way when I get out, I don't struggle?" And I was like, "Man, like, okay," I was like, "At what," and my only question back to him, I was like, "At what level in your life right now do you feel like you're not prepared to make that transition?" And so it wasn't, me at just feeding him a bunch of knowledge like I think anybody else would. It's challenging him to understand, where am I at right now and where do I hope to be? What does transition look like? It's kind of similar to the question that I had written down. And I won't spoil it, but I when I was at the hotel later on that night, I was like, how much have I really changed in order to be able to, if I was, 26 years old when I got out of the Marine Corps, would I have said that exact same thing? Or does all the pain points that I had to get through this transition, and even now, like, I feel like I'm just now starting to hit the baseline of what that transition will look like for me. Would I have been able to answer that question? I think probably not. Somebody would be like, "What's transition looking like?" I don't know, like, go to college, like, yeah, ASU's right there, some simple, nonchalant answer. But to ask him to specifically, like, well, what would your transition look like? Where are you at right now? Where would you want to see that kind of improvement for yourself? And I was like, if you're a husband, we can talk about what that transition is like for you and your wife, your care provider. If you're a father, what that looks like for you as far as, guiding your children through their education process and what that might hope to look like for them in the future. If you're an individual looking to provide purpose, for others out through employment, or if you want to become a teacher, if you think your service resides in being a first responder, I mean, there's we can narrow it down, right, and kind of formulate a path. But at the regiment level, at Wounded Warrior Battalion, they're treating it as like here's the lanes that you guys need to achieve, and then here's your transition. Not, hey, let's figure out what your specific need, because again, from a military standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, it's almost impossible to individualize. We, as an organization, it's impossible to do that. We have an organization to run, and it's not to say that it's inhumane or we don't care, because all of those guys and part of that organization have their own, niche of care, from coordinators to education providers, guys who are just like funneling, making sure they have what they need. And I would say they're doing a pretty good job right now, because they're very much aware that even though we can't individualize your plan and focus on you specifically, because we have an entire community of service members like yourself to put through this process, and they're all individually in different areas of recovery and care. What we can provide to you is making sure that you understand that if you need something from us, and that conversation is not being had. That's the conversation. I was like, hey, and have you ever asked your command that question? He was like, well, my command's never asked me what I want as far as my transition goes. They just show me every day where my appointments are, what time muster is, where what time, this special event maybe away from the facility is, and then that's it. And I wake up and I do it again every day, and then they go home on the weekend because it's Friday, and I enjoy my weekend here, at Native Medical Center. Or if I have, something planned with my family, I do that. So when I look at it from that standpoint, I was like, that's exactly what my transition kind of looked like. When I was getting ready to like figure out, okay, am I going to stay here? Am I going to get out? Am I going to get out of the Marine Corps, or am I going to go back to the Marine Corps? It was exactly that. It was like, here's your list of appointments. Your only goal is to make your appointments, so that way, the numbers and appointments look good. When command looks at, how many missed appointments we had, where recovery care service members are at, is their level of care being met? So from an organizational standpoint, that on paper, it looks great. From an individual standpoint, you still feel like, like, what about me? Like, hey, what's coming next for me? And I remember feeling the exact way that he did. But at the same time, I don't think, looking back, like I said, when I was in the hotel that night, I was like, man, like, how much have I evolved to be able to answer that question back with a question of like, this isn't about what I can tell you what's going to happen. We can definitely talk about it, but I want to know where you're at individually, so that way, if there's something I can contribute, or anyone else who's listening in this room, we had tons of congressmen sitting there, hospital staff, recovery care coordinators, command staff, and they all were just like, wow, like, we need to do this more. I like, that's the feedback we got from all having all four of us amputees there. Navy guy on my left, I'm sorry, Army guy on my left, Marine, a Navy guy and an Army guy, double amputee, single leg, single leg amputee, all different stories, all different times in combat, contributing back. And we weren't expecting this. They were like, "Hey, we want you guys to sit here. Okay, Q&A time for you guys." And I was like, "Oh man, like I don't know, please don't ask me anything. I'm not gonna be able to answer." But that one question, I was very taken back by.
I would say that what allowed you to give that quality of an answer is actually the byproduct of, and I'll loosely call it the negative aspect to your transition. All of the different hopscotches you made, all the different lily pads, so to speak, that you've landed on to eventually find what really drives you and gives you purpose. Because you even said it yourself. You got offered up a PM job. You didn't enjoy it. You got in there. You weren't a fit. It didn't mold and gel with you personally, but you would have been a good Marine and you would have just stuck it out. And I think that's the big thing that a lot of people need to understand when they're transitioning from these careers. You can get all the information in the world, get a lot of good information, but at the same token, it's your journey.
Yeah.
There's going to be an aspect of it that you're just going to have to step off. And then after the first step, decide, okay, where's my next step? Do I stay at this point? Is this a bad X and I got to get off of it? Is this a good X and I need to improve it? I don't, like you said, the military cannot curate a transition plan for every single service member.
Yeah.
They can give you umbrellas.
Right.
Hey, here's some general information. A lot of it is individual. You're going to have to make the decisions as you go. And like your experience, you did one, it didn't work. You got the opportunity for something else. You enjoyed it, but it was taken from you with the COVID, So that's life, man. It's just adapting as you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Adapting and overcoming. I say it all the time. My wife hates me for this. I was like, why can't we just pivot and keep going? She's like, because for you, she was like, it's built in. Like this didn't work out. Boom, on to the next. We don't ever sit down and like, can we just make sure that doesn't happen again? I'm like, I don't know, something random. Just a new bill comes in. I'm like, all right, whatever, just pay for it. She's like, no, like, how do we keep, it's just plan and prep. I think that's more of like the women's mentality. Right. But for us Marines, yeah, it's whatever comes, we strap in. If you need us to fight the good fight, we'll be out there fighting the good fight. As long as the initiative is in the right direction, support's there, the value of what we bring from our military service to the civilian sector is valued. And at my job, I definitely feel, and I know a lot of other veterans who definitely feel that way too. And some maybe not so. Hey, I'm in a position where nobody really cares, about where I came from and who I do. Here I'm a number or part of the assembly line. Yeah, and it's very true. Every transition cannot be, focused on at a single point. It's like, how do we create the best environment for these guys to succeed and hope that they do, and give them the support that they should have. I think from a current level of care for our service members, it's being done. It's us recognizing that, like you said, understanding how many times we've taken these different leaps and going back and having those conversations. So things like being on a podcast today is hopefully there's somebody out there that can take from, one small page that I have in my entire book of life and say, damn, like that guy got it. We understand that there's veterans out there doing phenomenal things, and they're offering ways for us to, be disciplined and go out and take challenges and create opportunities for themselves, both, just as an individual, but maybe on an entrepreneurial type side. But as like, when we get to these in-between moments of like, man, like how much of a challenge was it for you to do a transition? And I tell people like my transition away from the military will be the rest of my life. I'll be sitting, in a parade, hopefully, at 90 years old, waving at a crowd like, this is my transition today away from the military, being appreciated for my service of a time that existed when nobody knew it. I read something the other day that was it's been sticking with me for a while, and it said that you were dead billions of years before you were even alive, and none of that was ever an inconvenience to you. So you being alive now should be every bit of convenience to you and appreciated for. And I was like, damn, that's crazy. I was like, that's very true, because we're worried about, we're living now. We're not worried about when we die, but nobody cared that we didn't exist for billions of years before we came into our own existence. And it stuck with me for a while. And I was like, that's actually, I think it was a Taika's quote, something along the sorts. I may have completely butchered that quote, but I was trying to like internalize that as I, learn about other people's journey. I think there's a level of maturity that comes with it too. When I was 22 and I was freshly injured, the only thing I kept thinking about was, man, this sucks for sure, to how am I going to get out of here and what's coming next? Can I stay in the Marine Corps? Okay, let's go get it. I really wasn't, caring about what my wife was going through at the time, maybe like what my parents were seeing as far as transition go, what some of the Marines that I had served with, they were like, dude, why? I had First Sergeant Marcus Wilson. He was like, hey, and a first time meeting him in a prosthetics. And he was actually an instructor at SOI as a single leg above the knee amputee for 4.5 years. And he was like, where are you? He's like, where are you going to? And I was like, I'm actually getting ready to check in to my next command in a couple of weeks. And he's like, Devil Dog, sit down. He's like, let me talk to you. He's like, from my standpoint, he's like, I understand you want to get back to it. He's like, but I can tell you, he's like, you have to ask yourself if it's really worth it. And he gave SOI is dangerous. You got hills, you got training, you're with these new Marines on a cycle that's just repetitive because that's what the Marine Corps needs. And he was like, as an amputee, he was like, I loved my job, but I sacrificed more than I knew that I was going to have to deal with now. He's like, dude, now I've ruined my back. Now my other leg is shot. Now he's like, now I have to figure out how much time I'm going to have left to meet the rest of the demands of my life as a husband and as a father. And he was like, and I was young. I was just like, first on, you were already just, you were already up here. Like, I'm ready to go. Like, let's go. And I always carry that with me. And I was like, I wonder what it would have been like if I just accepted, that medical retirement, where I would have gone, maybe back to Arizona, maybe back to the Navajo Reservation, or, it's hard to say, but if things were the same way that they were, I definitely would do it again. Maybe do some other crazier things like, skydiving or something. I don't know, like something crazy. So, yeah.
Well, normally I end every episode with giving the opportunity for somebody to throw out some tips, but man, you nailed it. I would say that this is a good place to stop. And I just want to end it with saying, I wish you the best. I thank you for taking the time to share your story. And I wish you all the best going forward and everything you do, man. Good luck. I
appreciate that. Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
As always, thank you for listening or watching the episode. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out on social media or send me an email. The links are all in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're not already, please follow the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube. And if you would, please leave me a rating. Ratings do two things. You can tell me what I need to fix or improve, and the more ratings also gets the podcast recommended to more people. Another ask, please share the podcast with anyone you think could benefit from and enjoy it. And last, don't forget, sign up for the newsletter.